Protocols confirmed. Initializing ORC firing sequence. Connecting EML modules. Opening energy turbines. Output at 80%. Setting correction A-OK. 90, 95. I won't miss.
Secondary shield down.
What's poppin', gamers? It's September 9th, and that means it's the birthday of the Dreamcast in America. Woo! Hey, happy birthday!
Hey.
Hey. Nice. So the Dreamcast, mostly unrelated to what we're talking about today, has this little game called Frame Guide on it, which is a mech game by From Software. Best transition that I'll be able to manage to our actual topic, which is Armored Core. So, it's in the title of this video that you're seeing. I'm probably gonna have to do some kind of clickbaity Dark Souls reference, right? Because it's impossible to talk about anything From Software without tying it in with Souls. Obviously, that was their breakout fucking thing. I think most of us here probably. Their first exposure to From Software was through the Souls series. I know, Alan, you're actually an OG Armored Core fan, which kind of surprised me to learn because, like, there's not a lot of those going around, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, what's your relationship with the series? How did you come into contact with it? Maybe what's your relationship with From Software in general?
So, being a dumb baby Nintendo gamer as I was as a kid, I obviously couldn't play for, any FromSoft games, including Armored Core, because they're almost exclusively on Sony consoles and then later multi-plat, but not on Nintendo consoles. I had the cool older cousin archetype, and I was living with his family for a while. And he had a 360, and so that was like I got to play all the cool games like Lego Star Wars and I don't know, some other shit. And I tried to boot up Armored Core. I want to say it was 4 one day while he was at school, and it scared me because it was just like intense. And so he came home and I told him about it, and he built me a mech and then beat the game with my mech. And so that is like little Alan's exposure to it. I got a PS2 when I was like 16 and played like all the PS2 and PS1 era games around then. Also fell in love with For Answer around the same time because that game, as I'm sure we'll get to, absolutely fucking owns. I did even back when the PS3 server, the PS3 like community was still pretty active before it became like a Discord fighter. I did even play the 5th gen games online. So
sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5th gen will be interesting to discuss because I think that's the one that we have kind of the least experience with in our group.
Yeah, definitely.
I get what you're saying about Armored Core 4 is sort of scary immediately because it's such a naked like cold and like, fucking as
and coming from Nintendo games too.
There's something very like even just the font choices and the fact that everything's sort of white on black, super stark. I know where Thor High Heels got his aesthetic now. Like,
yeah. Also, every fucking menu, every number, it's like the original Xenosaga has like 7 zeros stapled on the end just to like make shit look intimidating. It's a very, it's overstimulating in a mechanical way.
Yeah, I have to say my first exposure to From Software was Demon's Souls. I was a pretty big fan of the PS3 at the time because, like, I couldn't afford all the consoles, so you got to become a fanboy for the one thing that you can afford, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was one of the first games that I ever imported from outside of Europe, and I thought it was super cool. And then obviously you want to research, okay, what did this company also do in the past? And then you can't help but get flashbanged by like the 4 out of 10 reviews for Kingsfield 4. I'm citing Kingsfield 4 especially because like it's on the PS2, so like relatively more recent. Back in 2009 when I was researching this stuff, and also similar in terms of setting and vibe and all that, right? But then because you see people so consistently say, yeah, these games are kind of janky and low budget and mid, you don't really further pay attention, especially when at this stage from our still pumping out games yearly that you can pay attention instead, right? I'm curious, like, do y'all have like maybe Hot Pocket? I know you're a big fan of you used to be maybe a big fan of the Soul series, and you sort of had a turbulent relationship with it over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I speak for a lot of people. I mean, I played Dark Souls 1, and I was like, oh yeah, this game's really cool. And I really liked it. And then I kind of, I played all the Soul stuff, and then as the years went on, I kind of got more. I've got more ambivalent on a lot of aspects of it. Elden Ring, I really had a lot of problems with, and it was I picked up Armored Core when 6 got announced. I'm like, well, I've always been interested in this, so I guess let's play these. So that's pretty much. I think a lot of people have a similar experience to that.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of expecting.
They're really good at making like these impossible sounding games, like a mech game where you can like granularly control every single part and it affects the build of your mech in like very kinesthetic ways. Doesn't sound like it would like be very feasible or that you could make a good game around it, and then sometimes they did. Dark Souls also, like the first immediate appeal of it is like, whoa, how did this exist? It's like RPG and action and good. And then you get hit with 1,000 little paper cuts of annoyances. But yeah,
it is to this day sort of startling how much of From Software's design feels like it's done in complete isolation of the rest of the industry, even though they're so popular and so mainstream now. And if we could talk about how that maybe manifests with Armored Core 6 especially. Does anybody else have maybe experience with From Software that's maybe slightly different from, okay, I played Souls when it came out, and
I think mine was pretty late. I think the first FromSoft game I ever played was like Ninja Blade or something.
Oh shit! Yeah.
whoa,
He's a true fan.
See, that's
it was not.
Yeah, that's such a weird era because I like that game and Demon Souls and then Armored Core 5 From were pumping those out in like a pretty short succession, right? But then I feel like Demon Souls and then Dark Souls later, it just dominated the discourse to such a degree that you kind of forget that From made those other games.
Well, yeah, that was like one of the interviews with Miyazaki when they announced AC6. He was talking about like a lot of the artistic choices from FromSoft games. Like they're partly it's like what they like, but partly it sounds like pragmatism. And I sort of wonder if that's like that kind of informs like their production, like what they choose to make as well. Because I was kind of thinking like, oh, they made 1 million Armored Core games because it must have been these are not super relatively probably not super hard to make, and then they also like do well enough that they continue to exist. I was like, okay, this maybe explains why like the like FromSoft design or like the Souls like design caught on so much internally. It's like we know how to make this. This is kind of like our aesthetic, and people like it's keeping us alive.
I've been getting into Gundam recently and doing a lot of research into like the history of real robot and mecha as like a style, and I think that like pragmatism angle really makes so much sense when you consider like this nerd culture in Japan is really focused on fixations. Like you target the people who are going to buy everything of your show or your game or whatever. And so you can afford to make, for the first Armored Core, like really complicated 3D models of all of these weapons and stuff. Because like mecha is this like primary cultural fixation for like that demographic. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I remember in my friend group, there was a point where some of us were kind of disillusioned with the fact that, okay, they did Dark Souls 2 in 2014, then Bloodborne the next year, then Dark Souls 3 the next year, and felt like, oh my god, this fucking company that I hold in such high regard for defying industry trends and doing something really hardcore, they're turning into the fucking Call of Duty factory, right? When if you think about it that way, like, buddy, you don't even know, like, 2003, I think, FromSoft pumped out like 6 games in that just 1 year.
Yeah.
So I think keeping that in the back of your mind with all this discourse is kind of valuable, because I've already been seeing people that got into Armored Core really recently and fell in love with it, and that's great, but then taking that energy and being sort of uncharitable to all the new stuff, right? And I'm like, I mean, you just know that a lot of it isn't really super rational, right? I guess, like, just kind of off topic, John, do you have, like, maybe thoughts on Ninja Blade? Like, did that maybe endear you to FromSoft? Like, you became number one FromSoft fan?
No. It was, I think I played that for, like, I rented that for, like, a week. I got halfway through and I'm like, okay, nah, this is kind of ass. Even like, 13-year-old me was like, nah, this is not great. And then even, like, the other, like, FromSoft games, I got a PS4 pretty late. So I played, like, so I tried Dark Souls, and then I bounced off that, and I got a PS4, and I'm like, well, I gotta play. I kind of willed myself into playing Bloodborne, and I think it was like Bloodborne and Sekiro were probably the big ones, and then I went back and played through, like, the Souls games, or at least, like, 1 and 2, or 1 and 3. But it's been kind of, I felt like in a weird position where I'm, like, both, like, late to the conversation, and then, like, one of the first ones to be like, yeah, this Elden Ring sucks. Like, and there's no, it is not earned at all, like, as far as, like, a non FromSoft fan. But it's like, I like their games, but there's definitely, like, maybe a distance. I don't know if it represents for me what it represents for a lot of people.
A bit related to everybody's, or has anyone here played any of their we just talked about Ninja Blade, any of their non-Souls, non-mech games? Because they have some non-Armored Core mech games that are quite different, but
I played a Togi and Metal Wolf Chaos, which are, like, Metal Wolf Chaos weirdly coming off Armored Core, which feels like it's made for a budget of, like, 20 yen or whatever, is surprisingly, like, okay, like, there's a bunch of voice acting, there's the similar level of customization, and there's also, like, all these unique assets, and it's like, it's weird to me, like, that's the one game that did not localize.
Even though Echo Knight made it over,
Yeah,
I remember looking at sort of super low res 240p footage on YouTube of Metal Wolf Chaos, because it was this very obscure game. The Xbox was region locked, right? It was not easy to get your hands on it, and even then it looked, oh shit, this is actually sort of leveraging the hardware. It actually feels like just when you see a billion bullet casings flying out of your Gatling guns, that somehow looked so impressive to, like, 16-year-olds yet when I was trying to research that stuff. John, what you were saying earlier, it did make me think that it's sort of interesting to consider how everyone I talk to feels like they have their different entry points, their own unique entry point for recent From Software games, and yeah, like you were saying, for example, Dark Souls didn't click, and then suddenly with Bloodborne and Sekiro, that made a lot more sense.
It's one of those, like, you see the essay, like the video essay on YouTube every so often, like, I'm playing Dark Souls for the first time, and it's like there's, like, an anniversary, like there's a continuing, like, news cycle of player, and I can't think of another game that has, like, a similar, like lifespan like that.
Yeah.
Or there are just all these people that are getting kind of initiated for the first time.
Yeah, and it really makes you think, okay, what is it about each individual game that, like, makes them click with different types of people? And then, yeah, I often have this experience, okay, maybe we, our feelings of, about those series, they kind of evolve as they go. I remember being sort of let down by how maybe streamlined something like Bloodborne is when I first played it.
Right.
But then literally that wouldn't even register to somebody who gets into that game first, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe their mind isn't, like, preoccupied with that kind of thing, and they can appreciate it on a more nuanced level that I, for example, wouldn't even perceive. I don't know. I find that really fascinating with this, again, with this a larger discussion of, okay, observing the series from the outside and then deciding to jump into it and then deciding how you want to jump into it.
It is one of the games that's the most like, if you want to be part of a conversation, jump into a Souls game,
Yep.
or like a FromSoft game.
Yep. And I really wonder if that's if Armored Core is going to have that cultural footing, maybe in a couple of years. I don't know if 6 maybe is going to do that. I guess I'll say I want to say I sort of became aware of Armored Core around maybe 2017, 2018, where I would every now and again I would see people talk about it randomly on Twitter, like Austin Walker from formerly Waypoint, I think, games journalist. He would often say, "Dude, Armored Core 4 is so good. Like, you play the missions on hard, and then the guy that was supposed to be on your side suddenly betrays you, and it's like so sick." And it's like every single like aspect of the series and every single possible meme kind of slowly enters your consciousness, right? Like, at someone you see the Armored Core grip, and you see PvP clips from stuff like 4th gen, and as at least in my case, it was the fact that I was keeping up with all their recent releases and like sort of getting burned out on how they stuck with like this template that they established in 2009 with Demon's Souls, and then knowing Armored Core is out there and then thinking, oh, maybe that would be really interesting to revisit, right? Maybe that would be like, I wonder what that would look like with their modern capabilities. And I guess like now that they have revisited it with 6, for a lot of us it was a question, okay, we sort of want to know what we're talking about. I think each of us individually we asked ourselves, okay, where do we even start with this like overwhelming big ass looking series?
I guess we can kind of ask ourselves that question. Do we want to start discussing the first gen of Armored Core?
Yeah. So for the sort of uninitiated that are listening to this, we've thrown around the word generation and Gen 4 and whatever like a couple times now. That is the best way to think about the series. VaatiVidya made a video about his experience catching up on the series, and in that video he made a little chart that I'm gonna show here because it explains it really well, where essentially all the numbered Armored Core games they all use their own engine. They're basically
the start of their own generation of games with general control and engine similarities between the games of that generation.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can transfer save files. It's kind of like it is actually comparable to Pokemon Generations in a roundabout way. And so the first generation is a set of 3 games. That is Armored Core Project Phantasma, and Armored Core Masters of Arena.
Yeah, you can look at that, for example, as its own little trilogy, and then you look at Gen 2, that's a duology, and I think it's relatively accurate to say that from Gen 1 to 3.5, the series is relatively iterative. It uses a pretty... Like, all these games, they use basically the same control scheme, and then they just make tweaks in different directions to any given individual aspect as they kind of go.
And it's actually, I have found some discussion in Japanese about the series, like, position as being very iterative and then changing everything up with the jump to the HD generation. And going from some fan anecdotes of people who were enjoying the games in Japan at the time, there was this kind of idea that FromSoft was realizing the idea of real robot in video games. And so it was almost like they were trying to tweak the perfect image that they were trying to get of it. And that involved, bringing in all these famous names from across the mecha industrial complex, as it were. You've got artists from all these famous animes and mechanical designers and stuff like that. And so playing them in order, which I don't recommend to most people and stuff, you kind of get this like, you kind of get them slowly clarifying what they're exactly trying to do, with some missteps here and then. But like, it is a genuine like cool experience to see like that slowly tweak and develop.
Yeah. Alan, can you maybe this term "real robot"? I can sort of imagine what exactly it means. I think this is the first time I've heard it.
Okay. Yeah. So this is, and I'm what the mecha fandom calls a bit of a tourist. I'm not like a long-term hardcore mecha fan, but so back in the day, you had a bunch of shows that were called super robot shows, and the best way calling them kid shows is a little unfair. But they're very much superhero shows that star robots more than anything. And then Gundam and a couple of its contemporaries kicked off this trend of real robot. And the idea here is they're more grounded in their technology and their world. You know, Gundam is a military drama. And that would develop over time. Realism is what the real in that refers to. And so Armored Core has this grounded, gritty setting, and Front Mission is a military drama. And Gundam, as it went on, got more darker and more mechanical, at least for a time. And so that's kind of the core dichotomy there is like real robot versus super robot. Gurren Lagann would be like a more contemporary example of super robot.
Maybe Zone of the Enders is a super robot.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of toes the line in some places, but yeah, generally.
Yeah, I think that is meaningful to establish because, as we'll get into, so much of the appeal of the series is the fantasy of I am actually piloting this big mechanical thing, and that context kind of helps to really explain the appeal and the meaning of certain mechanical choices and structural choices, maybe. I find it interesting that so obviously when the most obvious avenue to like experiencing the series is to just start with the first one, right? And I remember Hot Pocket, you wrote a review for this game, or you wrote some sort of stray thoughts, I think, on your co-host, and you were saying it's kind of, or was it backlogged? I don't know. It's kind of insane just how much of the DNA of the series was already present in Armored Core.
Yeah, I said it reminded me of Monster Hunter 1 in that way, in that like you look at like the years and years and years of iteration afterward. It's like, oh, actually, most of these they basically decided on from the beginning. It's kind of strange. I mean, they pick good ones generally.
Yeah, and I mean, in that way, a lot of people don't want to go back to a quote ugly PS1 game, but I do honestly recommend the first game, at least keep, because like if Armored Core had never existed and the first game came out today, it would still be cool and worth it to experience what it uniquely does. Granted, it's less unique now that there's, I think, 15 other Armored Core games, but it's worth taking a look at.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I was personally not that impressed with it by the end. I thought, it was like decent, like 6 or 7 out of 10, right? But just the fact that the idea of the series is expressed in like this really crystal clear way, and the fact it is the first one, right? So you might imagine, okay, there is more of an effort to like you're literally seeing the inception of those mechanics, right? So there's no expectation that you're supposed to fucking have any prior knowledge, right? And then even when you, for example, like just briefly touching on it, in the mech assembly, obviously your mech consists of many different parts, and a lot of those categories have just persisted all the way up until AC6, for example. There was some streamlining, but if you know what, for example, an FCS is in Armored Core 1, or like if you have a rough idea of how the legs work, then even that knowledge from all the way like back almost 30 years ago still transfers into AC6, and I found that pretty valuable as I got through the series. I think AC1 is also interesting because like it starts by immediately throwing you into this training exercise. You don't get to see the option screen first. You basically don't get to do anything prior to this, right? You're just thrown into this fight, and obviously immediately you're dealing with the elephant in the room, which is the controls. Does anybody maybe have thoughts on that?
I have a bunch, but someone should probably go first.
Maybe Simon. Yeah, I'm curious what you think.
So I will say, watching Vaati's video, like going through the 15 Armored Core games, and he obviously like expressed frustration on like kind of how unintuitive the camera is, and how that was kept until like 3rd gen. I do agree that like the camera controls from going up and down is very unintuitive. Same with strafing on the bumpers a lot of the times, and I do think that like the limitations on that does play a lot into the mission design of early Armored Core. But I do think that there is an appeal to it, especially when like a lot of Armored Core is like about aiming. So you have this like big bulky piece of shit that you just built in your garage, and then you send it out, and you barely know how to fucking control the thing, especially if you like tweak with like new legs and shit, you know what I mean? And you're just basically just like trying to like pilot this like thing, and then trying your best like minimize your risk and aim like the best you can. I do think that there is like a very simple appeal to it.
I'm curious, did you stick with the default button mapping throughout your experience with
I did, yes.
Oh, nice. Okay. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because,
yeah.
I guess it's interesting to know that the actual functionality of the controls is not... It actually is pretty close to a modern shooter, right? You can strafe in all directions, and you can aim left and right, up and down. It's just the way it is mapped by default is very... Since, you know, the controller... Well, I was about to say the controller doesn't have analog sticks, but you know, they would later make some games on a console with analog sticks and then still stick with these controls. So, like, you know,
good.
The way it does work in Armored Core 1 by default is that you use the back triggers to aim up and down, respectively, and then the bumpers to strafe, and then the D-pad is you know, it basically uses time controls, and then the face buttons are for all your major actions. Now, personally, I just immediately did the fucking crazy thing. The game has an option screen where you can just remap all the buttons, and what I did is I just I mapped all the aim functionality to the face buttons to basically mimic an analog stick.
I should have done that.
It's pretty swag. You are a sociopath for doing it right away, though.
Yeah, I'm a little neurodivergent. I can admit that. Do we have any other like gamers that stuck with the default controls?
I did.
I did.
Yeah.
Damn. Like, am I actually just the weird one? Like,
no. It is very normal within the community to do basically what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I just played the games for the first time, and I was like 15, and was like, that's the way I learned it, so that's the way I do it now.
Yeah.
I guess it's I guess treat what I just said as a sort of PSA, right? You get through this intro mission, and then you can immediately map the controls to whatever you want, whatever you find comfortable. And you're still, obviously, you're respecting the design of the game still, right? You're not really changing the nature of the actions that you can do, right? It's just mapping it to something that is more traditional, right?
I think it's worth noting also, like, the unintuitiveness of the control, because even when you've remapped it to be a little more natural, however you find that, the unintuitiveness has always kind of been like this. Especially up through the 3.5 gen games, is kind of like the whole legacy scale appeal of it, which is something you hear more in context of competitive games like fighting games. But that was like something the Japanese fan base especially really loved about these games, was how transferable skills were. And you can see, actually, I'm going to send these to Ziad to put up in the video, but I found some old forum complaints of people complaining when they added analog control because it made the game easier for new
That's
players.
crazy.
That's so awesome, dude.
Awesome.
We've been having the same discussion since the beginning of time. You know? It's impressive.
The thing about the regular controls is that if you start getting into like 3rd gen especially, trying to like do a lot of different things in the air is like your hand's gonna start to hurt. So
Yeah.
don't do that. Don't use the default controls.
I'll say
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I guess I'll say that even with the way I mapped it, you still have to 4-finger the triggers, for example. Like you have a left hand button and you have a right hand button, and then you also have a boost button, right? And I mapped all of those to the triggers. So it's not the most comfortable thing in the world either. I have the, it's funny because specifically for AC6 I got that funky DualShock 4 back button attachment, which is like the poverty version of those cool big dick paddle controllers that you always see for Xbox and PlayStation. And I'm curious to maybe revisit the older Armored Core games with that.
There's actually a long legacy of people adapting like flight sticks to PS2 for obvious immersive reasons, but also because just having the shit in front of your hands is easier for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I'm so happy that we're seeing a resurgence of that with 6 now. Like with all those crazy clips of people using the Steel Battalion controller, for example, on the PC version.
Can we? Well, because there's the distinction between the buttons you're pressing on the controller, and you kind of alluded to this, and then the actual actions allowed by the game.
Yes.
Which you could also call controls, I guess.
Yes, that was actually the next thing I want to talk about.
Yeah.
I think of Fury when I think of that.
So there is definitely obviously, okay, the button mapping is one thing. It is by default somewhat abrasive, but you can deal with it. But then the controls themselves, they have a bit of a skill floor. So for example, there is a pretty noticeable maximum turning speed that is affected by your AC stats, by your Armored Core stats. Armored Core is your mech. And then also there's a button called Boost. If you hold it while moving, you slide along the floor. And then if you tap and hold it again, you initiate flight. But a really interesting thing about the game is that, but all of the old gen games, is that when you let go of the boost, your mech has to brake, and braking takes a long time. And the way that, I think a lot of players discover very quickly to mitigate that is by bunny hopping. Again, the way that works is you just tap the button one time before you let go to basically jump and cancel out the brake. And I found that pretty satisfying. It does legitimately complicate movement, like coupled with the turning speed and coupled with how aiming kind of works, around the different obstacles that the game presents you with. Do you guys have thoughts on that? I think Hot Pocket, you're a big fan of the controls generally, right?
Yeah, I think the old controls are one of the best controls, like one of the best control sets, or not, the not button hitting part. One of the best like player sets of actions ever created, because of how just something that is weird about a lot of shooters is how you're able to aim and move very independently. In Armored Core doesn't have that. The aiming is very tied to your movement in a way that's like, it creates a lot of really interesting decisions. Like, I think like if you ever use a shotgun in old Armored Core, it just feels so unique because you have a maximum turning speed, I mean, if you think of an angle, right? If you think of like a cone pushing out, because that's basically what this is, right? It's a little cone coming from your mech. The closer you are to the mech, the easier it's going to be for the other whoever you're trying to shoot at to like get out of that cone.
Yes.
So it really it sort of gives you a very natural like balancing mechanism and differentiating the different weapons. Because then the natural like counterpoint to that is the long range weapons, which maybe don't do as much, raw damage, but it's a lot easier to keep enemies in your sight and do consistent hits on them because your lockbox range that they're gonna, is a lot easier to keep them in that. And like the energy system where it really is a very evolved version, I guess, of like soul stamina, if you wanted to compare it to that. But it's a lot more nuanced because it's this continuous resource that you use less and less. You have more and more to spare as you're more efficient with your movement. I think it's an amazing system.
It's like the rare control scheme to me that or the not button hitting part, where it feels entirely designed around accentuating like the player experience as opposed to like the way it engages with enemies, and it ends up wrapping around into making enemy engagements kind of interesting. I think like the primary appeal or the primary like success of these first gen games is like how much they make you feel like you're in a fucking robot. As cliche as that is to say, but like you have to consider so much about what you're doing that I think it also comes back to bite these games in that FromSoft maybe didn't consider what the enemies or scenarios were doing as much as they did on your end. There's a lot of really boring missions in these games.
A bit of a spoiler, yeah.
Yeah.
I have another spoiler as well, because like, Hot Pocket, I love your example with the shotgun, because it's sort of amazing that in AC6, they moved to a much more traditional control scheme. We're going to talk about that, but you still actually feel those sensibilities come through in that game, which I find kind of amazing.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to it. Maybe Simon, I know you've played a good amount of the arena in some of the games. Do you have like thoughts on, especially because you're stuck with the default controls as well? Do you have thoughts on that? How that kind of works? How satisfying that is?
Well, I was going to say part of like Armored Core's appeal is like balancing your AC to like kind of like fit with your playstyle in a lot of ways. Like it's not also just like you're just throwing parts that you think are going to be good. You're thinking about like what kind of parts would be good for like a situation, and the arena kind of like fits like really naturally to that idea. The moments that like an AC fight happens in the original Armored Core, like if we all remember like the like you're trying to defend the train and then you get blindsided. Yeah, after you're done like trying to like mess with these like planes up in the air, and then next thing you know, an AC just comes out of nowhere, and then now you have to fight it when you were probably like trying to like build your AC as like just trying to like deal with these like far range annoying flying enemies.
Yeah.
While meanwhile, it's like this AC is fast. It's immediately going after the train. So I do think that like the arena, like making these like little situations for you to like constantly customize your mech around them, it really does fit well into the series. One fight I've had in AC2 was the guy that like put all of his money like into getting the fastest parts. and basically anytime he boosted, I would have to like turn around the camera like 360 degrees. You know, and that was a struggle in its own.
Yeah, I think that is a good transition into sort of the building aspect of those games, which is if there's maybe two central pillars, it's first pillar is the controls and the actual piloting of the mech, and then the second pillar is building the mech, right? And maybe to briefly touch on the arena, it's this feature that they added with the second game, Project Phantasma, I think, and you basically go up this ladder of AI controlled armored cores, right? And before you fight, you get a little description. Okay, this is the types of parts that they use. This is how they act in combat. And then you actually feel this once you start fighting him. You, when the game tells you, okay, this guy's a coward, he just keeps running away, that actually is what happens. And in most of these games, I really appreciated the consistency in the sense that these armored cores and these like piling moves, that's all shit that you can do. You can actually build this exact guy that you're fighting. You can actually move in this way if you balance your energy right and if you're good enough with the controls.
It arrives at like, it feels like set piece design, but it's entirely systemic.
Yes.
It's genuinely super impressive.
That's a great way to put it. Like, it's systemic to the point that all these enemy ACs, they actually use ammo as well. So you can make them run out of ammo.
That's actually what happened in one of the fights that I did in the AC2 arena, where this guy, like he kept, like, shit-talking you, like, through the emails, right? Like, you don't want to, like, deal with this guy, right? And then you immediately fight him, and he just bodies you. And this is, like, relatively, like, halfway through the arena, if I recall correctly. And basically what happened, my strategy was to just run away from him until he ran out of ammo. And then I also ran out of ammo. So I just meleeed him, and he couldn't melee me because he didn't have a melee weapon.
So sick.
So he kept running away.
That's fucking emergent storytelling right there.
So true.
I think the other cute thing, right, is that I assume this can happen in other games, but in AC2 in particular, that's when I've gotten like a couple of victories just because I got people to dash out of the combat zone. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard that
happens
happening
a lot.
Yeah. It's never happened to me, but yeah.
Well, I mean,
I will
usually
s-
I just play in like the normal arenas that have walls in them. So.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, at its worst, I think it can kind of feel puzzle solvy
Yes.
in like a really simple way. Like, and this is a problem with that gets worse as the series goes on instead of better. Is
True.
tank build just wins sometimes, and it can feel like once you figure that out. And I'm sorry if I've spoiled that for people. It kind of gets hard to not just click that when you've like made it and got it loaded up in your AC data, you know.
I sort of feel that, yeah. Raph is saying in chat, this concept of like, everything is actually executed through the mechanics, the content in the game is built through, through the systems, right? The systems are already intrinsic to the player. This is a concept commonly seen in Western RPGs, every entity building on the same systems. Yeah, it's just something that I think you would also later see to some extent in the Soul series, and just something that I'm glad that they've kind of stuck with that philosophy for so many games. I guess one little PSA I can give is that whenever you're struggling in the arena, just take them to the garage. That's it.
That FromSoft, like inspired by Western RPG things, goes back before Armored Core 2 into games like Kingsfield.
Yeah.
If anything, I'd say it's kind of their thing, more than any other of their. You know, they're known for making super hard games, but as we might get into later, that's not really always the case. And they're known for a bunch of things, but really they're kind of atypical Western RPG trends seem to be the most common things amongst their games. Even their horror games like Echo Night and stuff are inspired by a lot of 90s PC Western horror games.
Yeah.
So.
I guess I want to talk more about the mech customization, the building portion of the series. I think it's fair to say that the UI or UX is not the most accommodating thing in most of these games. I think,
oh god, yeah.
It's terrible. I didn't realize that AC4 had arenas for the longest time because it's like it's
Dude, it's so real. It's so real.
It's so funny just how bad AC4 like in particular is.
And then like like inverting the controls. You got to do it from like it's not just in like it's not a system menu.
Yeah, it's not in the system menu. It's in the workshop, I think, or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, John just mentioned AC4, right? I mean, that's a game, you know, on the 360. There were Armored Core games on the PS2 that had much better UI than that game. And I think that is one thing that you know, we just recommended AC1 earlier as a nice starting point, but that is an aspect that does make me a little bit reluctant to recommend it, because literally you look at all these parts and you get very little context for what they sort of mean to each other, and transitioning from the shop to the assembly screen is really clunky. Actually getting the most out of the system just requires so much just tedious transitioning between screens and like looking at Wikipedia and not Wikipedia, but like the Armored Core wiki.
I don't mean to spoiler a later section, but I am so glad Armored Core 6 like had a context option, like where you could just like see like, okay, what does this actually mean? Like
this is basically off topic, but it was just thinking about context and sensitivity in video games so much, and seeing a button labeled in the UI context actually fucking cracked me. I don't know why. There's a lot of I get that UI in like the first gen games is really bad, but and it's not even a lot better for some of the later ones. Yeah. But I do think if you're the kind of person who's willing to go back and start like 16 game series with the first one, that the resources that make it intelligible are not far enough out of your reach that it wouldn't be worth it. There is like one Reddit guide for the first game that everybody points to and says, hey, this tells you what all the parts do and shit, you know?
Yeah. I just know, you know, our good friend Pang, that is one of the reasons he bounced off of Armored Core 1, because he said, yeah, it feels like a wiki game. It feels like I can't get the information that I need in a really digestible, fast way.
I think also a little bit of my UX complaints with the first Armored Core. Well, also this extends with the second Armored Core, is like shopping is like kind of a pain in the ass. Like, like the act of buying and selling like parts, especially when it's like, okay, so you want to like go look into a part, you look at the stats and you're like, okay, cool. But instead of just like comparing your stats like side by side with like a lot of other games, you have to like go back into your garage, look at the part, see its stats, and then be like, okay.
I actually just broke out a fucking piece of paper. I'm not
yeah. And then you gotta go in, back to the shop, buy the part. Okay, and then you gotta put on the part, see if it's not overweight. Okay, cool. Then you gotta go to the sell menu to sell your old part. You know what I mean? It makes menuing a lot longer than it needs to be, even though that like half of Armored Core is about menuing.
Yeah,
it's just like that for game after game after game too. Like it's such an obvious like this is what you are going to be doing a lot of time, like you just mentioned, but it just takes them forever to improve on it, and they improve on it in little tiny inches.
Yeah,
little bits. Oh, we're gonna move it a little closer in the menu option.
Yeah, I think this is really important to hone in on, because like I've had sessions with these games where literally I would just spend 2 hours building, right, and then it's like 2 a.m. and I'm like, oh well, time to turn the console off, right?
Yeah,
and oh yeah, go ahead.
Yes, yeah. Someone like jokingly said that like Armored Core as a series is like fundamentally about like spending 45 minutes on your gunpla and then spending like 3 minutes in a mission like killing mooks.
So fucking true.
You know?
And the thing is, I don't even think that that's a bad thing. I think
I love it.
Yeah. I think most of us would agree that the building aspect of it is like pretty intrinsically fulfilling. It's just that, yeah, because of that, right, the UX being, you know, accommodating is so much more crucial, right? And I want to go as far as to say that they didn't really figure it out until Last Raven, which is the final PS2 game. And that game.
I'm glad they got it in for that, at least, you know?
See, because they make an extremely important change, and that is, let's say you're in the assembly screen, you're in the leg category, and you're browsing through the legs that you already own, whatever. If you press circle, it brings up, you stay on the screen, right? It just brings up a little context menu where it says, okay, where do you want to go? Do you want to go to the shop? Do you want to go to selling items, whatever? And then if you click, for example, the shop, you go to the shop and then you stay in the leg category. And I know that sounds really simple and stupid, but like that is such an insanely helpful change. That just makes it so much easier and so much faster to compare things to each other. There's way less wait time. It's also that the shop list, or even the assembly list itself, you can see many more parts at a time on one screen. It's just really, really pleasant. And unfortunately, even I think AC6's UI is not bad. It's pretty okay, but it doesn't have that, right? It doesn't have those seamless transitions between the shop and the assembly, which I thought was kind of odd, because like that seems such an obvious thing to take in from Last Raven, but whatever.
It still like has a lot of back and forth, but also not the spoiler in that section. It's like you're worried less about your economy in AC6 because there's no debt. So most of the time, I see the shop in AC6 as kind of just like an unlock screen.
That's actually that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah,
instead of just how slow it starts.
This is such a stupid point, and it's a little sort of like a little unrelated, but like AC4, the missions are really big; they take up a bunch of the screen, and then in AC6, they're very small. And in my head, it's like, well, AC4's missions are much more substantial because there's not all this negative space on the screen, and you see like, and it's the same number of missions. It's like 3 missions, and like you'll have like in like the middle of AC6, you'll have like, oh, here's 3 missions to choose from, and it's like, man, this isn't a lot. This is kind of paltry. And then like AC4, it's like, wow, there's a bunch of missions, like 3.
So, like I said, the graphic design in 4 is on fucking fleek.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is worth saying. It is kind of insane how much of a downgrade AC4, like how much of a downgrade it feels compared to Last Raven immediately when I booted it up. Again, I don't even quite
it gets
remember.
Worse the more you play. So.
I don't even quite remember what my problem with the shop UI was in AC4. I remember I made an insane tweet rant about it because I could not believe the way it actually worked. I'm just gonna flash on screen here so you can read that. That game really feels like it was sort of rushed out for the PS3's launch. Maybe that's sort of the vibe that I get.
Even more than just the UI, yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk about that. I guess the last thing I'll say on this point is that this is one big reason why I always love to just recommend, okay, just jump into Last Raven, because it really irons out a lot of this vestigial, annoying fucking stuff. Except that game is insanely fucking hard. So
it's Rain World, dude. It's okay.
I don't know.
The joke about Last Raven Online is designed for like 15 pro players in Shibuya. Like 20 years ago, and you aren't them, so
that's so true. So I guess maybe this is a good time to talk about like overall structure and game balance and maybe mission design. We touched a little bit on economy. You go on missions, you earn money, but then also after every mission you need to repair your AC. So depending on how much health you lost, there's a rewards reduction or deduction, I should say. And then also you pay for the ammo that you used, right? And an AC1 that actually manifests in a way where you can go into debt. You can receive negative amounts of money every single time with a mission, to the point where you may have to restart the whole game. Yeah.
I was just gonna say you can fail missions too. You can fail forward.
Oh yeah. That's a great point, actually. If you fail a mission, you don't like the game just keeps going, right? It doesn't let you instantly retry the mission. If you want to do that, you have to reload yourself.
Most of the time. most of the time. There are like
That's-
the story-related missions where that's just like a
Which
hard-
is very odd. Yeah, there's some missions where you just
Yeah.
game over, and
that,
then
yeah.
And honestly, FromSoft's commitment to this whole like single linear experience is very wishy-washy throughout
Yeah.
the whole series.
that's the thing. I really like the idea of an honorable playthrough of like something like Armored Core 1 or Silent Line or something where I don't
Yeah.
just save after every mission and then reload if I didn't like how it goes, right? But then
Mhm.
you sort of have to do that because you don't know if you're gonna get a game over, right? That's gonna wipe 5 hours of progress.
The games also are like entirely fucking built around it as they go on.
Mm.
Like the save scumming, the way you can start a spiral in some of these games, like we were talking about Armored Core 2, the start of it is very hard.
Mm.
And if you do bad at the start, and then it's a positive feedback loop. That's the word. It's such a like it gets harder and harder if you're someone who's worse at the game. Is like very atypical in a kind of, you know, people poked at that with Souls a lot, but to me it feels very clearly undesigned more than like deliberate in any way.
Yeah.
Especially as Human Plus, which is the you mentioned restarting your playthrough after failing once. That's what the name for that mechanic. Especially as that became less emphasized, it definitely felt like they were considering their campaign mechanics a lot less.
The Souls stuff really is like the actual version of that, where they like could do what they wanted to do. I think.
Yeah.
The thing is, they can't autosave back then, right?
Yeah.
So that just screws up everything, and pretty much like, yeah, Armored Core 2 is really the last game where they actually kind of tried to do it, and even then, it's just like whatever. They just beyond that, they just kind of gave up, and it's like I don't really blame them. It's just
Yeah.
it doesn't really work.
And Armored Core 2 might sound late for people listening, but that's the 4th game, and there's like 7 more on the PS2 after that. So they dropped it pretty early.
Yeah. I sort of implied earlier that, okay, I now see people being a little bit uncharitable to the newer Armored Core games for dropping this aspect. And again, I feel like that's a little bit unfair, right? When you consider, okay, I feel like when we're talking about how cool debt is in Armored Core, we're talking about it on the level of as an idea and not actually an execution.
Yeah.
It's like how are you going to implement this? Are you actually going to have people like restart their 6-hour saves? You know, like that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
That'd be sick. That'd be kind of sick if you actually like sat down and said, okay, this is actually going to be a consequence. How are we going to design the game around this? But that's just too. It's too punishing even for FromSoft, I think.
Yeah.
I'm a big strategy RPG guy, Fire Emblem in particular, and the way permadeath functions in the game is kind of like this long-term consequence for poor play that doesn't make you restart. Is kind of this never-ending subject of discussion amongst the fandom.
I do want to ask: did anyone here play Human Plus by chance?
I did not.
I failed out of Armored Core 2 the first time, and I just loaded the set, or I just like restarted the game without Human
okay.
Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would really applaud FromSoft if they maybe tried something like if they made a more earnest attempt at something like this again. But again, like you were saying, Hot Pocket, I don't blame for it, and I think it makes more sense to compare the newer games to what the series was actually like, rather than our kind of idealized version of how cool this mechanic kind of could be. Because again, I feel like that's what I've been seeing a little bit in the discourse. I guess, Hot Pocket, I'm kind of curious, do you have takes on the economy in the series in general? I know maybe it's something that like bothered you a little bit, that it's not really more of a consideration in the design.
I don't know. It's just kind of like, the problem is it's sort of a weird position where so if you're not going to have the punishment for failing, then it's kind of the same thing as I said for debt earlier, where I'm trying to think of the games where it even really matters. The games where it matters are the ones you can fail out, like 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And like the other, actually, I kind of ran out of. I ran out of some money in Master of Arena. I can't remember why. But like other than that, it's basic. I think somebody said it was like red orbs and DMC. It's like, yeah, that's basically what it is.
Yeah.
That's what I was describing Armored Core 6 shop as, like, essentially money just became red orbs.
Yeah.
Especially because you can just replay missions, you can grind missions.
Yeah, essentially.
I remember
And you're just unlocking like Stinger.
Unlocking Zimmerman twice.
game done basically.
I think
oh yeah, go
with
ahead.
these like super like this game has a lot of unique appeal, this series rather. And it's already quite hard to get to grips with for most people. And so I think it kind of makes sense to just ditch the idea, even though it is cool, because there's still the game is not lacking for challenge, and the game isn't lacking for like unique appeal, which is the thing that both of those add. So like, and I see the sentiment and echoed a lot online. It's like, yeah, it's cool. I don't really care though. You know, it's like there's a future where Armored Core developed into this like ultra maximalist, like fucking brutal, like resource management video game, and that game probably fucking rips and owns. I love it, but you know, I don't lament it being gone, I guess.
Yeah. I think 3 is not one of the games where you can fail out, right? And I do remember ammo cost being much more of a consideration in that game. Like, I would seriously, I would get pretty serious pay deductions on certain missions for just being reckless with my Gatling, right? And that did make me rethink, okay, maybe I should, you know, just for the sake of being able to afford parts later, because I know I can't replay missions. I can't just easily grind money.
Yeah. It kind of does matter with the ammo. I would agree with that.
But then at the same time, I felt like, okay, then I just picked still really strong weapons that cost less ammo, right? Like there's always ways to like game it a little bit and to not have to think about it very hard. But then again, I can't imagine what a more ideal version of the system would look like. I don't really know.
You just have to redo it all, I think. If Raf's there, I don't know if he can get on the mic. Because you mentioned like racing games. I think that makes sense as an analogy.
Yeah, racing games I think would be a good, because like you're having to like make choices on like what parts you want to buy, what parts you want to sell, whether or not you want to like what races you want to do. I guess more like a simulationist sort of approach where you're constantly relying on resources and stuff. It's like almost there, but like
I think breaking up a playthrough into like, and this doesn't work with like the corporation war context of Armored Core, but like I think breaking it up into sections, kind of like I don't play a lot of racing games, but like R4 has you do the two races, and like, you know, if you're going to kick someone back to the start or something, not having them restart from the very start of the game, you know, it could be interesting.
That's a pretty good idea. Like a Grand Prix, but it's war.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't even have to be war. I don't think literally anybody here has played Formula Front, but that fucks around a lot with like the series aesthetics and narrative elements in a kind of cool, less nihilistic context. That's pretty cool.
Formula Front sounds like a Ryan joint, because you're the PSP's because you're the PSP's biggest warrior.
It's a cool game. I would recommend Formula Front is one of the games I would recommend to like anybody who likes Armored Core. So.
It is on PS2 though.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Oh fuck.
It's on both.
Yeah,
there's a couple
I thought it was exclusive. Damn.
Since we're on the topic, Last Raven on PSP is hot fucking garbage, but 3 and Silent Line are good.
Oh shit! Is the frame rate like super bad or?
No, I just that one is really where like the limit, like the physical limits of the PSP are really fighting with the controls, right?
Yeah.
So
Or because that game is so much harder than like
Yeah,
3.
yeah.
It's a pretty easy game.
See, I'm sad Pang isn't here because like he would take this as a challenge. Yeah, he'd be like, okay.
Oh yeah, it was a lot harder on PSP, but you know, I couldn't stand it.
Yeah, I guess I want to say about Last Raven real quick. It does again. It goes further in this direction of okay, the fucking like there's no debt. The economy doesn't really matter that much. You can instantly retry missions. It sort of just acknowledges okay, this whole system doesn't really make sense. It does make some interesting tweaks in the sense that weapons degrade, or parts in general, they degrade in value with every mission that you take them on. So there's actually a bit more strategy in the sense of okay, when do I buy the parts? When do I actually use them? When do I sell them? And then there's also the arena that now takes an entry fee, right? So if you lose in the arena, you actually lose money. But then you can also still infinitely grind it. And I feel like that as a... Yeah, it still has this thing that John mentioned where the actual progression of the story, you still fail forward. Actually, no, you don't. I'm stupid. I think the thing is that you don't have missions that you can just easily grind in the main story, but in the arena is sort of this fallback option where if you find yourself being short on cash, you can just do that. I thought that was a nice balance for what it is.
And it's also like Dead Rising, where it's you can reset the campaign and take all your money and do it again. Yeah.
See, I was curious about how exactly the campaign reset works because it offers it to you, but it doesn't say exactly if it keeps anything. So that's kind of cool. I guess, yeah, the major thing left to talk about is like the mission design and just the general tone and the themes of these games. And again, Hot Pocket, I keep deferring to you because like you've written a good amount of the series that was really concise and well put. Which is that it's weird for a From Software game to think now where okay, these mechanics are super fleshed out, but the actual game that's built around it feels a little sloppy, a little sort of just there.
It's very strange. It has the series has the opposite strengths and weaknesses of Souls in a lot of ways. The mechanics are extremely well considered and high quality, and they were able to basically just copy paste it over, no changes for game after game after game.
Mm.
They were able to make the famous Nine Breaker, which is a game just about like training missions for like PvP or whatever. But yeah, the weakness is so if you think of like FromSoft now, especially if you play Dark Souls 1 and stuff, they're always super well known for level design. Like wow, Dark Souls 1, you know, Sen's Fortress, Anor Londo, Undead Burg, right? Like those are some iconic areas or whatever. Armored Core consistently has extremely terrible mission design that that downplays everything the game does well and just comes across as bloating the game, which is crazy in a game series that's not even that long.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll do cool things, but not often.
Well, they give you those as little crumbs to keep you going, so that you look forward to the next one.
Yeah,
you don't get it, bro. It's a major story event.
I feel like Nexus, the first mission of Nexus, kind of summarizes the vibe of the whole series because like you start in this canyon and you walk through the canyon and you shoot at a couple guys and the music is pushing you on. And you're like, oh shit, this feels like we're doing some shit, right? And then you turn around the corner and then you shoot two more guys and you see the canyon sort of opening up a little bit in the distance, and then you hear a voice in your head that says, "Good job, Raven. Mission over." And
no. Does everyone know about the one helicopter mission in Nexus?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't actually.
Okay, so it's a mission to you kill a helicopter. Literally just like one of those regular ass helicopters in every game, and you start right next to it. That's the mission.
That's
That's
so awesome.
It's avant-garde.
When talking about the first Armored Core, everybody brings up the mission where you get surprised. There's a couple of them, but I don't want to talk too much specifically about it. But everyone forgets like the first 7 missions of that game. They're like, shoot these guys who die in 2 hits. You have 400 bullets and 8 million health.
Yeah, I think they forget about the next 7 missions too, and the 7 after that.
Yeah. And then you, the late game missions is quote unquote dungeon crawling, and it's like a poison room. You know, and they're just like, find these 4 bombs, and you don't know where they are, and every hallway is the same.
Yeah.
I will say there's a mission early on in 1 where you can't shoot these things in the room because if they do, they blow up, and it has the tendency to crash on PS1 hardware. And I think that might be better mission design any of that Dark Souls stuff.
Wow. Yeah, they really. I don't know what happened. I don't know how they fell off so hard.
Silent Line and Last Raven, in particular, amongst the old gen core games, do like way better jobs of it. I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I played about half of Silent Line, and I was like, yeah, okay, they're actually kind of trying now. It's like if you want to like experience the full blah 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 Armored Core, okay, go on and play the games. I think I would unironically just tell people to play Silent Line and Last Raven and not play any of the other ones.
Did you get to the orbital laser?
Yeah, that one was like, okay. They're like, you know, somebody's actually trying here to like.
Someone is directing the video game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's this design going on.
They're even playing like the kick-ass song right then. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, jeez.
I think just like for Silent Line, part of the reason it works so well is that like I was going to use that mission as an example, the one with the satellite cannons, where it kind of is leveraging like the scenario design and the environment more than like the raw enemy encounters, because you have the space where, you know, the cannons are forcing you to move, but there are like the consistent spawn points with like the rocket dudes. So you're kind of like managing the lasers like as micro, and then you have the guys that are flying, and then the rocket dudes that you're also having to be aware of like as you're dodging the lasers and just that kind of stuff. There's another mission where at the very start you're inside of this plane shooting these flying dudes, but then like halfway through you get let out, and it's like, you know, you're on top of the plane, and then you have all the guys like flying around you instead of just in front of you. So it's like, you know, more movement for you, but you have to kind of manage the enemies a bit more intentionally.
Yeah.
Just that kind of shit like really fucking works instead of just
They don't even really like figure out enemy design until like some missions in the 4th games, I feel like, because like it is really cool that you can like, you fight someone in the arena and then they have this cool animated personality, which is pretty weird for hardcore, and you can build their mech and be them, LARP as them or whatever. But a lot of that is not conducive to like an actually fun fight a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this guy's themed around playing cards and he does this thing, and you shoot him and he dies. Same as a lot of the rest.
Okay, don't diss number 1111 from our
fucking guy. Oh my god,
I love that guy. He stays at number 11 because it has 2 1s.
I remember playing AC5 with Raph in VC, and this was like the city mission, and there were these snipers perched on like a building, and I got close to the sniper, and then it actually it sort of leapt into the air and it hovered and it repositioned itself, and I was like, whoa, I think that's the first time I actually I think that was the first time in the entire series that I saw an enemy like intentionally move.
For 20 years they did it.
I praised 4th gen for a second for like having some more complicated enemy design, but like half the missions in Armored Core, I swear, like swing at this untextured black box.
Yeah. I have to say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Silent Line is one of the games, unfortunately, that I skipped, even though I kept hearing that's like one of
Cringe.
the... Yeah, I know. You're right.
Everyone boo this man.
Boo!
He played Last Raven. It's good.
I finished 3, and I think I was just sort of ready to like move on from this engine, right? I wanted to kind of experience the next big leap in the series. I guess I'm curious, how is Silent Line from a fresh save file? Because I wasn't really feeling the idea of just taking in my Dundee like AC3 mag.
I think that's the best way to play it. Personally.
Oh, okay, cool.
Same.
Nice. That's good to hear.
I did the import, but it's like it wouldn't have been a problem. You could have done a save file, and it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, I like that sort of that mental reset of like, okay, I wanna think about how I actually approach this in like a meta way. I'll say about Last Raven. Again, I don't have the comparison point of Silent Line, but I think the missions in that game are still really short. I opened with the Nexus example because it's just so stark, because like this could be a cool mission, but it feels like 70% of it is just missing, right? And in Last Raven, again, everything is still relatively brief and concise, but not in a bad way. I feel like it is sort of condensed to the harshest and most like gut-punching kind of moments where you go through a tunnel and then somebody fucks you over, or you suddenly have to fight this crazy AC. And the game also, it's very famous for the fact that the enemy ACs cheat really hard. They defy most of the stuff that we were talking about before, in that you can't build or move anything like this. And I wrote a review on Backlog that it's like very brief, it's not very fleshed out, where it was just sort of summarizing my thoughts. But basically what I said there was that, yeah, it's sort of cool in the moment, but sort of unsatisfying, because it gets away from this systemic appeal that we kind of were extolling earlier.
Yeah.
Do we have like Last Raven enjoyers here?
Hell yeah. I stand with you that it's like the old gen Armored Core game most worth playing.
Yeah.
Both from like a cultural perspective of like this infamously brutally hard game, and also like it's just actually the most fun one. It is also the trend line from like it to the 4th gen games.
Yeah.
Is like the 4th gen was famously this big reset that pissed off a bunch of boomers because Armored Core did kind of fucking suck. But you can see like a lot, they were messing around with getting a little less systemic for more engaging fights. Yeah. That's like a big thing in the 4th gen, a lot with enemy design, I think. Not in enemy ACs in particular, but they start leaning into more set PC stuff like arms forts and such.
Mm-hmm. I think also it's worth saying that Last Raven is a really concise game in general. It goes for this sort of multi-story route thing where, depending on the missions that you choose to engage in, it pretty drastically changes what you have access to after that point. And the game as a whole ends up being, like, a single playthrough ends up being a lot shorter than some of the other games in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually really enjoy that. It actually feels like it's condensed to just the sweetest moments.
It's funny that it's the game that de-emphasizes like a lot of those campaign mechanics the most, like in regards to debt and Human Plus and such, when it is maybe the game most set to capitalize on them by having this like kind of wide but short branch of missions.
Yeah, I guess that is sort of a sense that I was left with, that this is really cool. But I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 on Backlog, right? And I feel like I could maybe fall in love with it more. But it still didn't capitalize on what maybe could have been there quite as hard as I would have maybe loved to see, right? But still a very, very cool game. It's just, again, I don't know how abrasive it will be immediately to a complete newcomer. Yeah, we've touched on it a little bit. Obviously, there's still 4th and 5th gen left to talk about. Did anyone except me and Alan? I think Raph, you played 5th gen in the past as well, like a while ago.
Long ass time ago.
Yeah. Did anyone else play 5th gen maybe recently?
I've played a touch of Verdict Day, only like 3 or 4 missions. Okay. But I see the vision.
Yeah, I think that game is surprisingly cool, and it's sort of funny because you would think So to be a little bit reductive, 4 is the big go fast zoomer game, and then 5 ostensibly reverts a lot of those changes and it becomes a more measured, slower paced game, kind of like the older titles were, except it actually changes the control scheme much more drastically than 4. 4 did actually have, like, it still has boost and thrust the way you would kind of expect from the old games. It still has the left hand, right hand kind of system like you would expect. It's just that it lifts a lot of the inherent limitations of the control scheme to give you more freedom, whereas 5 is a complete overhaul. It just works completely differently.
I think Vaati said in his video that like 5 kind of like goes for like more of like a war sim vibe.
I can see that, yeah.
Where like 4 is just like straight up mecha power fantasy.
Yeah,
you know.
4 is a little more romantic. Was the word I used when I wrote about it.
I see the video.
5 is also, I've heard, I can't remember, I'll look it up right now. There's another mech game in that generation of consoles that 5 is like more comparable to in aesthetic.
What's that?
I'm looking it up frantically.
Vanquish.
Sorta, actually.
Wait, you know, honestly, I see the vision. Chrome Hounds. I've heard it compared to Chrome Hounds quite a bit.
Okay.
That's FromSoft's game. That's goofy.
Yeah.
Oh, so Raph, are you familiar with it?
That was my introduction to From. It's,
oh, what the
slow as hell.
Hop on Enchanted Arms like a real one.
So true.
Oh no.
Final Fantasy X, but good.
I guess I'll say I'll get the obvious, the elephant in the room out of the way. 4th gen is much easier to go back to than 5th gen. 5th gen has to be like, I mean, I didn't play enough Verdict there yet. I played mostly 5. But those are just such technically badly performing games. Like 4th gen, the contrast between 4th and 5th gen is like so emblematic of the 7th console generation in general, right? Where, okay, 4th gen, they feel like they pick right up where the previous games left off. 60 FPS, looks really, like, very sparse, simplistic visuals, but looks very clean. And then 5th gen gets overambitious, barely reaches 20 FPS. I like the art style of the 5th gen games, but I think the way it actually arrives on your screen in the end looks like
yeah,
it's a hot mess. Like let's
yeah. Ryan was playing some of it, and I think it was like the general agreement is it looks like when you go out of bounds in an open world game to like the background areas where there's no textures or anything.
It's like when you start boosting.
Okay.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Because Zayed, you played 4th gen on 360, right?
Oh yeah, I should, yeah, I need to admit that. Like, I think that's a big factor as well.
I don't know like how different it is, but I know there were like
it
times
kind of runs like
when
shit
I was playing For Answer, and for context, the build I went with at the start was independent, and you have like the pulse shoulder gun, and there were times where you use that and the game drops to like single digits.
Yeah, I think I didn't play 4 that long. I finished For Answer, and it never got that bad. It does slow down at some spots, but like most of the time it actually hits 60, and I was pretty impressed by that.
I was talking about these two games with a friend the other day, and I think the conclusion. Oh my gosh, my internet! The conclusion I came to was that Armored Core, like the 4th gen game, achieved their aesthetic because of the hardware they're on. And the 5th gen games achieved their aesthetic in spite of the hardware they're on.
Yeah, that definitely hits. So I think 5th gen also, the dead zone on the analog stick feels very badly tuned. That's and just generally the aiming feels like surprisingly much choppier than Last Raven, for example, or 4th gen. It's all those things that make it very abrasive to kind of get into. But there's some cool saucy stuff in there. For example, they have this insane, like, so the hover, or I should say the ability to fly is completely gone in 5th gen. Instead, you can hover, you can jump, and then you can hover at that height. But then you can actually still gain more height by wall kicking. And yeah, it's so based. Like the environments in 5 at least are really dense. Like it's these really dense lineups of skyscrapers that you can sort of hop back and forth between, and it feels like it actually, I sort of got the sense that they were trying to think, okay, how do we, again, we touched on like Armored Core always had this sort of problem with its with the accessibility of its controls, right? Where any way you slice it, you're always stuck like at least 4-fingering the gamepad and just ruining your hands. And I think in 5th gen, there was an effort to maybe compartmentalize the actions a little bit. And again, you engage the hover, and then you're hovering, right? And then you can focus on aiming, right? It has that, this is going to sound derogatory, but I don't mean it that way. It has that sort of modern 7th gen kind of pacing to it, where you're actually going through like curated scenarios, and there's a checkpoint system, and you're carefully engaging the enemies that are perched in the distance. You're using walls and just the geometry in general, both for movements and for cover. I don't know, I think that's, I didn't finish 5, I got filtered by one of the missions pretty hard, but I definitely want to keep going. I think those are games that you definitely shouldn't ignore.
Zia,
yes.
you and I once had a conversation about Gunvolt, of all things, I think, about how like increasing player like expression with character design can be like harmful to the like to level design and enemy design stuff.
Yeah.
And I think like I mentioned that like real robot fantasy that has been like seeded in Japanese culture 50 years now. I think they maybe try so hard to sell that to people that is kind of what gets, because people hated the kick when AC5 came out. They're like, why can't I fly? You know?
Interesting.
But like, you know, the it gets in the way of that fantasy. It might be the kind of root of why maybe it's not present in 6th gen, and they didn't do it for a long time before that, because
that is a really interesting angle that I hadn't considered. Yeah. I think I guess I'm curious how the reputation of 4th gen is sort of weird now, right? Where Alan, you sort of touched on how there's Armored Core boomers that don't like it, but it feels like maybe that is kind of a Western sentiment. I'm kind of curious, maybe how did the Japanese audience receive it?
Yeah, so like those 15 people who Last Raven was designed for, like wanted to like burn down From Software. But outside of that, even 4, as kind of messy of a game as it is compared to 4 Answer, was kind of appreciated. I see a lot more appreciation for it. And also, the Armored Core Zoomers who started with 4 are Armored Core boomers in the West now.
That's so true.
so like the general opinion of 4 Answer has kind of finally caught up. 4 Answer especially. 4 is still kind of hated.
Yeah.
But the general opinion of 4 Answer has finally, I think, caught up somewhat to the game's quality. There's always going to be like 35-ish, 40 people who appear under every post about the game to shit talk it, but like you can just block those accounts.
Yeah.
I do get it. Like there is an opportunity cost of you'll never get another old gen Armored game. And especially after being conditioned to think you'll get so many of them, it's kind of sad. And also, even Last Raven doesn't, like we said, fully push that to what it could have been. But I don't know. You know, 4 Answer fucking shreds. So.
I was really impressed by it.
I wish I could have been one of those 20 people, but I didn't get there. I didn't play. I didn't get to play for Answer because I was busy playing all the games with bad mission design.
You can you can still get there. You can still
I can still become a hater.
Yeah, exactly. I guess like to touch on a little bit, so we briefly mentioned, okay, 4th gen actually does feel like it continues in a relatively logical way from the old gen games. It takes a lot of those foundations, but then just basically it removes all the inhibitors, right? You have a lot more energy to spare. There's the quick boost, which existed as a selectable part in the old games, but is now part of your standards kind of toolkit. There's a dedicated button for it, and there's this really so you can quick boost in 4 directions, but then also you can do a 90-degree turn with it, and there's this really interesting wrinkle to it where you have a recovery period after every quick boost, but then you can cancel that by boosting in any other direction, right? You have to boost in a way that is not repetitive. You can't consecutively boost in the same direction. And again, the 90-degree turn is also included with that, right? So after a turn, for example, you need to, for example, boost right to reorient yourself. And that immediately feels so enjoyable in a way that is still very Armored Core to me. To me, it still had that. Like, if so much of the appeal of Armored Core was controls and like the feeling of I'm in a big machine, 4th gen still is that, but just in a totally different way.
It's funny because like it's in the same way that like really good movement in the old gen games. You post a clip of it on Twitter and you're like, I'm fucking schmoving, and people are like, what am I looking at? It's like the constraints aren't transparently visible to them.
Yes.
It just looks like you're fucking zigzagging on a screen doing nothing.
Yeah.
But it is genuinely super cool.
Yeah, unfortunately, as we implied before, I think the game they built around all that with 4 is very limp and very sort of nothing. I didn't finish it,
it's
but
very Armored Core.
I was more turned off by it than I guess, like, you know, there's the factor of I knew 4 answer was right there and that it's way better supposedly. So maybe I didn't have that level of patience for it. I think, Alan, you're a relative 4 defender a little bit, maybe.
Yes, but like I think I've said like 3 times in this podcast, it kind of fucking sucks. So like, it's more like I was around those Armored Core boomers when they were at their most prevalent, and so I just kind of have a chip on my shoulder. And I'm always, and I'm always like, people trying new things and messing it up is cooler than, just iterating like the series did. So I'm part of the 4 Defense Force. That is also more on like an aesthetic, narrative, musical level. I love a lot of those elements of 4. We talked about how fucking cool the aesthetics are, but
I love the music.
It's like the Japanese butt rock. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Oda Hoshino it's crazy that he's back for 6, considering that game doesn't have an OST. But
hey, no, that OST is good.
I like it too.
I haven't
need to change the mixing. The mixing
it's not included in
the mixing.
It's not in the PS4 version. The PS4 version doesn't have a soundtrack.
Yeah, the game couldn't run it and go at 60 FPS.
No, guys, y'all were too busy hearing the Zimmermans and the Songbirds.
So true.
To appreciate it.
I have actually not used a shotgun in 6 yet. I'm still innocent. I did in 4 answer though. That shit is like crazy.
Oh god, it's like crack. Yeah. It's honestly like bad for your health.
There's an early mission in 4 where you're sort of perched on this little island and the sky is like dark and there are all these enemies coming at you from the distance and they look like sort of red stars in the sky. I played that section and was like, okay, this is like an Alan moment. I think this is something
I know the exact moment you're talking about. There's also like the most weaponized bloom I've ever seen in any video game. In some of like the 4 answer fights, the fight, the setting where you fight a certain mech who I won't name drop for spoilers, but is like very iconic to the 4th gen games. That arena is like the most beautiful I've ever seen in a video game.
I'll say, 4 answer immediately gelled with me so much more. It does make a few more mechanical tweaks. I did feel like I immediately had a lot more energy to go with, which I feel suited the mechanical focus of that game a lot more. But then also it has a surprising level of variety and intention in its missions, actually. It feels like it actually really, in a very honest way, carries the torch from a game like Last Raven. There's a mission where you blow up this port, this this ship water port, and it's relatively easy, but the way they convey it with the music and with the enemy dialogue is they're sort of all afraid of you. It feels like you're the monster in a horror movie, right? And the way then just again all the different scenarios and the pacing of the mission, kind of how that kind of plays itself out, I thought was very satisfying.
We kind of talked about like the scenario design taking a bit of a leap forward with Last Raven and then the 4th-gen games.
Yeah.
And I guess this is like the aesthetic half of that. There's a lot more. They seem to be more self-aware of when something is dramatic and actually portraying it in a dramatic way.
Yeah. And you mentioned the arms forts, which are these insane...
they're so fucking cool.
Yeah, it's like... they're basically these giant machines that physically move through the environment, and they have all these little moving parts to them that attack you, and then you can use parts of them to block shots. You have to be very intentional with your movement. The environments are also partly destructible in a way that actually affects gameplay. You can, for example, shoot out bridges underneath enemies. It's obviously, again, like a lot of single-player games, like any Armored Core, there's ways to not utilize any of the stuff and to be way lazier in your gameplay. But I would go as far as to say that For Answer is a almost arcade pilled game, in the sense that you can pick it up and it's just a blast to go through. There's not really a dull moment in it. I was really surprised on that level. Yeah.
Even though you can ignore a lot of those like side mechanics, like the destructible stuff, I think that stuff is super cool. It kind of taps into that Devil May Cry like storytelling in your fighting. Like, I don't want to shoot the bridge for the mechanical context of shooting the bridge, but I want to shoot the bridge because it's cool that I can do it, you know?
Yeah.
I get a lot out of those kind of things in games. So and Armored Core boomers also think it's cool, but it might as well not exist because it's not optimal. So
true. I think it's just it is a legitimately impressive game for that early in the generation, I feel, in a way that was not really conveyed in reviews, I think. Like the reviews sort of focused on the fact that the models are not very complex, the textures are kind of bland. They did not mention that it's just so weird, dude. Like, again, did not mention that it runs at 60 FPS. That's just super clean. That, again, the sort of environments, the scale. Yeah.
It was a different time.
Yeah. I think it's a game that is much easier to appreciate now. And I guess it would be so ideal for a re-release. I think people would latch onto it pretty well, but
I think
it's like the entire series though. Like I think this game would do like fantastically, but it's like tied up in licensing, because basically every entry was published by or was published in the West by a different publisher. So it's like 4 was done by Sega, and then 4A was done by Ubisoft, I think.
And it's different regions too. Like some of the publishers had the Europe release, and others had the American release.
Yeah.
On top of all that, there's some mechanical designers who are famously kind of similar to like some of the artists, and they would want their stuff in a re-release because the license is all up in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like the 5th-gen games make maybe the most sense for re-release because it's Bandai Namco, so it feels like that wouldn't be too complicated. I think VaatiVidya is even still available on those storefronts.
Also, it would give the online a boost, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think those games they would benefit a lot from being 60 FPS and like a resolution that's not mud. I would like that.
Oh man, yeah, it would be great.
So, has anyone played Ace Combat?
Only the bad ones, personally.
Such as?
Well, this is going to be public, so I can't really list that.
I think the 3 Ace Combat fans are going to be okay with it, if you say it.
No,
they're too distracted by the red blinking lights, you know.
So Hot Pocket prompted me to ask that question, and I think I sort of see the meme, but like
I haven't played any of them, but I think Armored Core 6 is the newest one from what I've seen of all the whole series.
I've been seeing a lot of takes like, okay, there's some crossover between the Ace Combat Armored Core 6 specifically audiences somehow, and maybe some design overlap. I don't know if that's true, to be honest, but I guess to just settle it immediately, Armored Core 6 were newly forged Armored Core Andes, right? I think we're authorities to speak on this. Did From Software nail it? Did From Software nail 6?
Yeah, they fucking did.
In my opinion, also yes, they did. How does everybody else feel?
It's my favorite game of the year so far. I would say.
I'd say it's my favorite Armored Core with like 12 asterisks.
Well,
I am still the certified silent line enjoyer, but 6 is pretty good. Yeah,
nice.
I think Four Answer might be my favorite, but I don't think FromSoft did any nailing it on this one.
I think I need to like let it settle a little bit. I'd like to do like see the true ending, but I think it's definitely upper tier. Or it's like not just upper tier, but I think it's like one of the like the best so far. I feel like I'd probably be 4A or Last Raven a little bit more, but yeah.
John, I remember you being kind of a doomer on 6. Like you're like, oh, they're gonna fuck it up. Like 1000%. Do you regret your words and deeds?
No, I do. I think it was like warranted coming off like Elden Ring and playing that for 2 seconds and be like, holy shit.
Oh yeah, dude.
When they said it was going to be 50 hours long.
That's insane.
No, it was like 50 hours to like just get all the endings. That's what they meant.
Hot Pocket, you're the final gamer. I'm the most curious about your take.
Yeah, I was really into it first, and now I'm kind of like, it's cool, it's good, but I have a lot of problems with it now. It's kind of it's honestly like a vibes game for me now, plus some other cool things.
Okay.
Welcome to my side.
Yeah.
That's how I feel mostly. Like it's mostly experiential for me.
I can understand that. We started the whole thing with controls. That again, we named that one of the big pillars of the series, so it makes sense to do that with 6. Obviously, that is the one aspect where you expect the most drastic change and the most modernization, right? If you want to put it that way. My first stark takeaway when I actually started aiming at people and started firing at people was that this actually feels like Armored Core. Do you think that's an agreeable statement overall? Maybe.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Kind of.
I guess like I'll give a little bit of an intro, and then I'm curious how Pocket about your counter. So this game moves the big thing, the massive change that it does is that it detaches the camera from the character. If you stand in place, you can move the camera, and there is still when you're playing with controller, there is still a maximum turn speed. But moving the camera does not necessarily move your character unless you're already firing or something. From still decided to somehow this is not just a third-person shooter due to that change. What they did is they actually still found a mechanical way to implement the FCS, the fire control system from the older games, where to briefly explain it again, you have this massive lockbox that is tied to your character, and when you're turning, you're also moving the lockbox, and then anything that's in the box is locked onto, that's what you're shooting at, right? In 6, that is still sort of how it works. If you move the camera, you don't see a visual lockbox, but if you move the camera at an enemy, they will be targeted. But then there's a secondary reticle detached from this targeting system that indicates where you're actually firing, where your shots will land. And it's sort of bouncing around in a semi-random way. And it gets more and more accurate generally the closer you get to the enemy. Obviously, that can still change, like depending on your FCS of choice. But the general vibe is that when you're circle strafing around an enemy, and depending on how far away you are, you still actually have to think about the trajectory of your shots. It's not like, like maybe some of us feared Dark Souls or something where I hit the lock on once and then I never have to worry about aiming again. I had a section today where I was like messing around with the laser shotgun, for example. And in the test room, I was circle strafing around the test enemy, and I was firing, and I was not hitting a lot of my shots because the momentum that I was moving with caused the shots to kind of go askew. And I noticed, okay, I have to move in the opposite direction to make the shots hit, right? And that's a kind of dynamic that I don't really feel in many comparable sort of modern games. And that did feel very distinctly Armored Core to me. Now, I think I would also agree that the system is not perfect, and it's something that we're gonna explore more as the game kind of lives its life, right? Hapaka, I'm really curious about your take on all this.
Yeah, I mean, I at first I was like, oh man, they nailed it, etc., etc. I think I have a lot of problems. Some of that stuff you said, I think, is definitely true. Like you definitely do have to kind of watch where the reticle's going as you're moving, and that does affect your movement. Where like, okay, if you want to like jostle around your camera and stuff a lot, you got to be careful. So, because if you break the lock on too much, it's gonna screw up your shots.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, that stuff I said like 2 hours ago about like shotguns or whatever. I mean, fundamentally in the old Armored Core games, right? Which is what I didn't play. I didn't play 4th or 5th gen, so I can't really compare to those. I mean, you have range and you have direction, right? As like limited factors that are not instantly changeable. I mean, basically the whole like you said, the whole point change of Armored Core 6 is aim is instantly changeable. Like direction of aiming is instantly changeable.
Yeah.
And like, okay, what are you gonna replace that with? Well, they kind of didn't really replace it with anything, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, realistically, it's pretty much just range now. Like, if you use a shotgun, it's just obvious how much instantly easier it is to use than the old games. And so, okay, that's fine. And I played on controller with limiting my sensitivity. Because if you limit your sensitivity, you do get a little bit of that kind of old stuff back. Because you have to keep enemies in your sights more with positioning, like you would have to in the old games. But then the hard lock, where so there's two locks. The soft lock is what people call it. It's just around your reticle, and it's just okay if you're pointing at the enemy, it'll like put the reticle on them or whatever, like a regular Armored Core game. And then the hard lock is like a Souls quote unquote lock, where it locks the camera to the enemy the whole time. Theoretically, the penalty is that it makes your reticle go around way more. But in practice, I found that's not really the case a lot of the time. Like you still aim pretty well for almost any situation I was in, and it simplifies the movement and aiming a lot. And like I feel like you're not really punished for that.
I also think it's just because also a lot of the FCSs that you actually do buy in the game are very good at close and mid range.
Yeah.
Like there's only one FCS that's like long range, and there's like no like snipers in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, the closest you have is like a laser rifle, but that's like a mid-range weapon still really, like you mentioned.
Yeah, so the game kind of does push you towards playing a close mid-range style a lot more than well, I can't really say much about the other Armored Core games, but yeah.
I'm probably the only person here who fucked around with the training missions a bit, just because I was curious how the game would tell you how to play the game.
I played them
I think one of the like second or third ones literally tells you to like get up in your enemy's face or something equivalent to that.
Yeah,
because I did it earlier today and I read that and I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, maybe as a brief aside, for example, this game also it retains the assault boost mechanic from Armored Core 5, where you just go really fast forward, and during that move, for example, your accuracy and your the lack of recoil, or sorry, your accuracy is increased a lot, and your weapons don't recoil as much, your shots don't recoil as much. So that really ties into this idea of aggression that you just mentioned, Alan. I think, yeah, it also is worth mentioning, I sort of touched on the idea that, okay, your camera is detached from your AC, and then when you fire, your AC still has to turn. That is way less meaningful than it actually sounds in practice. I did find the turning to still be really fast with most builds. Now I will say, in my personal experience, I did feel I was using the lock-on versus no lock-on pretty situationally. I felt there were distinct moments where one made a lot more sense over the other.
The enemy design really leans into that a lot.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah,
I did feel like even with some sort of faster moving foes, I felt like, okay, I'm noticing the accuracy difference at least a little bit, right? I do understand the frustration that maybe it's not as well thought out or well tuned of a mechanic as it could be, but I still find it enjoyable to play with, I guess.
I think it's I mean, yeah. And you might mention this, but I think the game where the game does shine is, I think it did do a pretty good job with the defense aspect.
Yeah.
The game is at its best when it just shoots an insane amount of projectiles at you.
Yes. We'll definitely talk about that.
The Itano Circus early on in the game is like up there as my favorite moments in the series now. It's such a cool thing the first time it happened. I guess I will say, as the supreme vibes gamer each gen, the enemy design, especially with the amount of moves that break lock on, and just the differences between this lock on for other action games, it kept the vibes of being in a mech for me. And as we've discussed, this is a vibe series, not a gamers.
You're kind of cutting out, but I understand what you mean.
Yeah. See, that actually is interesting, because like I was thinking, like if my lock-on broke in Dark Souls or something, I would be raging at it. I'd be like, this is fucking broken, this is stupid, this is not working how it's supposed to be. Whereas like here it feels mechanical, and I think it is mechanical, like more so than it is in like other types of games. But I don't know if I can really justify why. Do you guys have thoughts on that?
It might have something to do with like shooting versus melee combat. Do you think?
I think it's like, I want to say it's more the fact that like the FCS, it has a bunch of stats tied to it, right? Like that are tangible. That very explicitly say to me, okay, it's good at this range, it's bad at this range, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, even just the context of, oh, I'm piloting this machine and I'm toggling into this mode. Like the way the lock-on itself works is interesting, because you're basically switching between two modes, and then when you're in the target assist modes, it will just lock on automatically, like as soon as it can, and then that will, like, I think because of that because the action works that way, because that's how you initiate it, it also feels like it makes sense that it can disengage on its own, right? When, for example, the enemy does some funky movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I found that very enjoyable to play with, and also very original. I can't think of many games that really feel like this, and again, it leans into the fucking mech fantasy, you know? Like, it gives me that vibe. Yeah.
I do kind of mourn, I get this is the first Armored Core game in a decade, and a lot was probably writing on this game for this series.
Yeah.
But I do kind of mourn that, like, where the 5th gen tried to be more creative with, like, sniper rifles and kicks, like we've talked about, this game has significantly less of that. It definitely was trying to modernize the traditional fantasy of Armored Core as opposed to do anything new with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of those design decisions also make sense when you think about it in the lens of, okay, how the fuck do these actions fit on a controller, right? That's something that the series was always wrestling with. Again, I say this for a third time now, but like at minimum, you're four-fingering the shoulder buttons and getting cramps. And obviously, when this game decided, okay, this is a game where you aim with the right stick and you have weapons occupying all of your shoulder buttons, that only leaves the face buttons to perform basic actions like ascending and dodging. And once you realize that, then you start sort of accepting, okay, I can see why even the existence of target assist, of a lock-on, where I don't have to worry about moving the right stick constantly, kind of makes sense, right? There's also, I think, another change that suits this is the fact that, yes, you ascend and you fly around like Gen 3, Gen 4, but the way you descend is a lot slower. There's much less, well, I don't think it's gravity, it's just the fact that your AC suspends itself in the air somewhat, and that gives you time to aim when you're not constantly, again, massaging the X button, right?
It's interesting, like, there seems to be like a conscious decision to like you said, like keep your mech in the air longer.
Yeah.
Like even when you get staggered, just hang in the air for a second.
Yeah, and I also noticed that so again, my first instinct was, I wish there was a way to return to the ground faster, right? Like in 5 or all the older games. But then, number one, actually you can fall faster by just keeping the stick neutral, right? But that has its own ramifications. You can't, you don't keep your momentum that you were going with, right? And that may make dodging certain attacks more difficult. But then also, it makes the act of going in the air in the first place a more committal action as well. I did distinctly find a lot of situations where I would decide to go in the air and then realize, oh, now I'm sort of stuck here, right? And there's another thing that ties in well with this, which is the fact that your energy refills much faster when you're on the ground.
Yeah.
So
I felt this a lot in the crab boss. The kind of like wanting to be the push and pull of wanting to be in the air versus not. It felt very tangible there.
Yeah, I think that's very clearly the conceit of the defensive play in this game, where like, because yeah, the like you mentioned, well, there's two aspects. One, your energy comes back much faster. Two, you actually can get energy back in the air, but it goes to half instead of full.
Yeah, and
so I think that combined with the slow fall speed is like pretty clearly, okay, you basically have X amount of dodges in the air, and then once you use them up, you can't do anything until you get some more energy. That's the whole premise, yeah.
And then even just expending all your dodges in the air, it doesn't mean that you're going to return to the ground faster, right? You actually have to think about this in advance a little bit. Then a way to think about it may even be, okay, I try to only use half of my bar and then try to return to the ground and keep that remaining energy as a failsafe in case something happens to me on the way there. I thought that aspect of it was really well done. I guess maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about like defense and dodging and stuff in general, because as many a Dark Souls player will have noticed, this game does not have invincibility frames on its quick boost, on its main dodge mechanic. And personally, I felt that the challenges were tailored around this extremely fucking well. I think Balteus is probably where we first started really noticing this. I just remember, okay, all my synapses were firing. I'm like, yeah, okay, I see the vision. I see that this is actually a three-dimensional fucking game where I genuinely have to think about how I'm moving.
Yeah, Balteus has this like one attack that like you really have to like pay attention to your FCS, like the little indicator that like this fast laser that it fires is like going to come at you, and you can't just like mindlessly react by just like hitting the square button, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it also tracks if you're not careful, and it does like a fuck ton of damage. And that's kind of like when I had to like kind of like get a little bit of the modern Soulsy aspect like out of my head, you know what I mean? So
it's funny, you don't have the invincible dodge to rely on, but I think Hot Pocket was talking about around the time we like the game was first coming out, that it's funny that FromSoft's like these are Dark Souls bosses, and like the Balteus has a Pontiff Sullivan move. It just feels like straight up.
Yeah.
But because of the difference in the way your character functions, like they're actually kind of
It's 1,000 times more engaging.
Yeah. There are a few bosses that are I literally was like, oh, they're using this Elden Ring moveset. It's kind of like it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, fucking.
It's cool, but yeah, it's their best bosses because the core mechanic. Okay, this is gonna get me evil hate mail from somewhere. There's evil comments on the Beach Gen videos, because the core mechanics of Souls are so impoverished that they just can't do anything. And if you just transplant that to a game with much more interesting and fleshed out mechanics, it's like, oh my god, I can breathe again. I'm like,
yeah,
it's like it's so much more interesting.
Yeah, it's just again, Balteus is such a good showcase of even variety of projectiles that are coming at you. Like some track you, some don't, some have a delay before they come out. They track at different speeds, and then like even just you have maybe a rocket sort of trailing you, and it's curving, and you're going forward a little bit, and then you actually still have to think about, okay, it's like a little behind me, and I can't just back away now, right? I have to. I always have to keep this in the back of my brain, and I think the game is very consistently engaging in that way as well. There's a really good variety of those types of experiences, and again, I said this before for Answer, and this rings true probably even more here. There's not really a dull moment. I felt like the game didn't lose steam until the very end for me in that way.
Yeah, I was also gonna say, like, I actually also do appreciate the bosses that like demand you to like actually like hit a weak point. You know, which is not something you see in Souls, right? Well, very often, anyways. The one boss where you're fighting when you're fighting this guy like in the tank, but like his center point is like yeah, but his center point is like a normal ass unit, right?
Yeah.
And my first time actually fighting that boss, I posted it on Twitter like a while ago. I basically had to like keep focus on the center and not like the back part, I believe, right? And I positioned myself in order to like align with the songbirds, and then just as it was like at one point like going away, like trying to like reposition itself, I fired my bazooka, and then it staggered him, and I got to like cash in my damage and like end the fight like pretty fast. It was really cool.
Spencer, who I was playing with, was playing a tank build, and they just fucking wedged them. They managed to like, I don't know what they did to the AI of that boss, but the boss just continued to wedge them inside of it because they were tank build, and it was over in like 15 seconds. It was pretty impressive.
I think this is a good point, good opportunity to maybe talk about the stagger mechanic, which is one of the big new things.
Mickey Rowe, 0 out of 10. Boo.
Yeah, you fucking nailed it. So we're gonna talk about how obviously fucked up this mechanic is in a sec. I want to play devil's advocate for a little bit because I do think, as an idea and like a lot of the time in execution, it is pretty cool. Because they coupled it with the fact that every weapon either has some kind of cooldown or has to be reloaded, right? It runs on magazines. So basically you build up the stagger bar through damage. The same thing can also happen to you. And once the enemy is fully staggered, they're incapacitated for a little bit. And then I think after a couple seconds they can move again, but then they're still officially in the staggered state. And as that is going on, you do a fuck ton more damage. And that makes you consider, okay, do I have all my weapons reloaded for this one perfect moment? Also, does my build actually does it have the ability to take advantage of this, right? Is it built in a way where I have a big chunky weapon to even throw at it? Because I remember I've had situations where I would build something that is fun and interesting for most of the mission, and I'm getting on well, and then I get to like a boss, and I notice, I can stagger them, but then I don't actually have anything to capitalize on the stagger with. Which is not, it's not something that will just completely wash you and make you lose the mission or something, necessarily. Like, you don't completely have to rely on this mechanic.
To also build upon that, it also like kind of helps that like some of the encounters will break out of stagger a lot easier. Like they get flinched, and like they'll still be in that state where they take like double damage, but like then they'll be up moving again, starting attacking. So that kind of like also has to play into like, okay, I need to like have like a build that like can immediately cash in that damage at that time frame.
Yeah. Like for example, there's the assault armor, of course, which is this if you want to use modern esports language, it's your ultimate that you can throw out at certain intervals. The one I used was this like big fucking blast, and it's cool and it does a really good amount of damage while the enemy is staggered. But as we mentioned, the incapacitated aspect of the stagger only lasts for a couple seconds. And that often is not, like, even if you have a big chunky thing to throw at them, then if you didn't position yourself right, if you didn't plan for it right, you're still not going to be able to cash in the damage, because they will move away really quickly and then maybe even stagger you, right? So I think it is a really cool idea, and it fits a lot better than you would have expected. It's not literally like the worst case scenario that we were imagining, just copy pasting Sekiro system, for example. But yeah, if you look at the game's meta and how that's evolving, obviously there's more to be said about the stagger. Maybe Hapaka, do you have like a take on that?
I want to hear Raph say it. Sounds funnier.
let's hear Raph.
Oh no, I think it's ass. This is a really bad mechanic. The fact that it gives you a damage bonus when they're stunned is just a terrible idea. There's a reason most fighting games, when you're stunned, you take less damage, because it'll just steamroll way too fast, which is what's happening here.
Okay, but it's fun.
It is fun. It's fun from a single player perspective, right? But like competitive, it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, From Software makes single player games now, dude.
Yeah, well, I guess it's their like reticence to actually like separate the balancing between the two. Also, like if this was tweaked for multiplayer, it'd probably be a lot better. But even in single player, there are like dumb things you can do with it. But it's also mostly
it makes tank builds even better.
Yeah.
I do
also,
think...
there's this like weird. Oh, sorry. There's this like weird thing. I don't know if anyone else disagrees with me, but it feels like the weapons that do good damage also do good stagger damage. Like, I don't really understand what's going on there.
Shotguns, songbirds, yeah.
Like, I mean, some of it's like, okay, this single weapon is very good, but also just in general, it's like, it feels like isn't necessarily even much of a trade-off, and like, I want to do stagger damage now, but build up permanent damage. Even in Sekiro has that. Like, Armored Core does not have that much, in my opinion.
It seems like the trade-off is more between rate of fire and those two things coupled together. Mm-hmm. Like, you either have something that fires a lot quickly or does a lot of stagger and normal damage.
I think that's sort of true, yeah. Kinda.
I mean, like at the very basic level, SMG quick, Songbird slow.
Same can also be said. I was running actually double songbirds and the majestic bazooka for a while, and basically it's like literally every shot. Well, besides like songbirds, they surprisingly track pretty well. But like if I wanted to like get something like big, I would actually like have to like actually like kind of align that bazooka shot instead, you know, especially in like the later fights when like ACs start dodging a lot better or they start healing. So
yeah, that's a great point that I want to touch on as well, because maybe to go back to the single player versus multiplayer dichotomy, I do think AC6 makes a case for why it's okay in this case to maybe prioritize the single player experience a little bit, because it actually fleshes that out. I think, Ralph, you said something really interesting a couple weeks ago where we were talking about like combat depth and just encounter design and stuff in these games, and we seem to agree that okay, Armored Core was like a series with really cool fighting game PvP mechanics that they built kind of a lame single player around. Whereas this game has really good scenarios and really good enemies, right? So
yeah.
No, he's right. He's right, and I'll stand for it.
Okay, y'all seem to disagree.
Like relatively speaking, it's probably the best of the series.
Yeah,
I'll give it that.
yeah. Thank you. Relatively speaking, yeah. I think playing only Armored Core and Pikmin for like the last 2 months, that may have broken my brain. Okay, like, I think that is just it.
Play Zooey too.
So
Again,
fucking
hop
true,
on.
actually. What a game.
I love that. See, I've been trying to not say it.
So really good enemy encounter design for Armored Core. And yeah, I think again, Simon, you just mentioned enemy ACs, AI ACs will also heal. They will also use repair kits. But then you can actually time your attacks so well that they don't even get to do that, right? And that feels so fucking awesome.
oh yeah, I loved it when I did that.
Yeah, it's like I think on those merits, it's a mechanic that overall I do enjoy. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole stun mechanic also is it's just the same stun mechanic in Final Fantasy VII-R. It has a lot of the same issues.
Why would you say that?
It's the exact same system.
See, but like I don't want to just like stood here as a hypocrite. Like I don't want to have to accept that.
No, it's the same system, but you don't have to worry about like health gating, so that's good.
Oh
That's
yeah!
cool
Oh my
robot.
god, so fucking true. No, it's that. See, that means it's totally different, actually. So, fuck you.
Okay, yeah. I helped you. Yeah.
I guess. Do you guys want to talk about like mission design and stuff in general? Any hot takes?
The structure is bad.
Yeah, the structure's real bad. I kind of don't know what they're thinking.
The New Game Plus shit, where it's like you get to unlock the interesting, like where you get like the branching pass, New Game Plus 3 is really bizarre.
They did for like I haven't played Last Raven, but from what I heard, they did the Last Raven thing, but the game is like kind of long, so it's like what?
I think Last Raven also just branches more quickly and more afraid.
Yeah, what?
Like,
I don't
the mission,
understand.
so Alan isn't here, but the mission where you get in New Game Plus, where there's the two Balam guys you can betray at the dam.
So sick.
Like that should be available right away, because that would be a great moment. Because if that was like the first hour of that game, and then people were like, "Oh man, I don't want to be an evil bad guy. I don't want to go kill the Noble Liberation Front," and then I can betray these guys, and then you would like try to do it with your starter mech, and you got killed in 2 seconds. Would be like a great little moment of like of like, I want to do this thing, but in this corporate hellscape, I can't. I don't have the means to kind of act on what is probably the right thing to do, and it's so weird to me that they like say that for like New Game Plus when you probably have a mech that can just decimate those guys.
Yeah. I feel like that's the thing. If you'd made it available just from a fresh save file, you could have still had that effect of like, okay, you tried on New Game and feels insanely hard, so you just decide to like roll with it and not betray them. and then on New Game Plus you do it, right? It's just, it feels very. I don't really see, like you guys said, I don't really see the logic behind it.
I think it's just a production thing. I wonder, because the game I think would be like shorter. Like I think the 50-hour thing was probably to be like they're coming off of Elden Ring, so they want to make sure that their next, like, and this is not exactly a Souls-like, but this is the next big FromSoft thing. So I wonder if it's just from a purely like business PR perspective, they want it to be able to say that this is still carrying on the tradition of good value per dollar.
Yeah, I should clarify maybe that I think the 50 hours. It wasn't really clarified if that was like a misquote, or Simon, you were saying earlier they were referring to like getting all endings or something. Because I remember there were like 2 different interviews, and the other one said, yeah, it's 20 hours for like a playthrough, which is a lot more accurate.
The original post didn't really clarify that,
exactly,
like, about like New Game Plus, which ended up becoming like a major part of this game. You know?
Yeah.
It's something that definitely like surprised me. Like that's when like the major branching like happens on New Game Plus. Like as John said, like the Balaam guys that you can portray like early on. That's sick. I do wish that was actually like earlier in the game.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it was just like a way to like, I guess, like surprise the player. Like, oh yeah, this is your reason to play New Game Plus.
Yeah, the thing is, it's such a weird thing because I'm not too far into New Game Plus yet, but it feels like most of New Game Plus isn't actually like that. You don't get those decisions that much more regularly.
Yeah. I played some of the New Game Plus, and I was at that moment I was like, oh, this is gonna be cool, and then yeah.
No, it almost reminds me of like, and I feel weird for referencing this because I haven't finished any of them and I don't like them that much, but like Nier or something, where it's like you're kind of going and you're flying, like New Game Plus. It's not really a difficulty change, but it's going and kind of getting this additional context as you like fly through it.
Yeah.
With your end game build to get the new bits of like lore and story and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I want to say I felt that the maybe let's call it difficulty curve of the game on New Game felt really good. Like the trickle of new parts and how the challenges were kind of matched to what I had at any given moment felt really good. And now in New Game Plus, I'm like steamrolling. Like even with not the craziest fucking build, I'm steamrolling so much of it. And one of our homies, Madison Beak, he was also talking about, by the way, working on a great game called Magenta Horizon. You should download it. It's great. He was saying in his review that this game just needed to be generally way harder in every single mission on New Game Plus.
Agree. In general, honestly.
Yeah, yeah.
The difficulty is really weird. I think it gets nice at the end, I would say, but like, yeah, there's just way too many, like, especially at the beginning, there's all these kind of nothing burger missions where it's, they need like 3 missions of like, okay, you go there and you shoot the guy so that you can like, this is the controls, stuff like that, right? And then it kind of keeps going for a while, and like, okay, I'm gonna dispute the fact or the idea that this game has enemy design, or rather the fact that I will dispute the assertion that it uses it well, because I don't think it does. There's these little. This is pretty early on, so I don't mind if I'll spoil this. But like these like invisible guys you find, right? Who have like, they kind of like jump around and like snipe you, and like then there's a variant with like a whip that'll lunge at you. It's like, okay, this. We need to channel our ZOE2 here. We need to like combine these with other enemy types so that we now have like a variety of threats coming at you. This does not occur.
Yeah.
This game's understanding of like encounter design is, okay, we put some MTs on the ground and then we put some snipers in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe in that way it is very Armored Core in the sense that
they still but FromSoft's always been bad at that.
Yeah, so there's a cool idea and just the other 50% is like missing. Yeah. Cuz like
if someone does a ROM hack of this game, like a mod or whatever, where they like change all the levels, that could be sick.
Yeah, I think on my first run I didn't really mind that a lot of the stuff was like kind of popcorn enemies, because I was riding on the high of, oh my god, I'm controlling a mech and it feels so cool, right? Like,
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
there's
that
anything
really
wrong with that.
carries the game super hard. And then on New Game Plus, again, when I'm playing with an even stronger mech, and yeah, I don't know, I agree with you all that in that sense. And again, I was saying this like a couple days ago, where I was sort of asking myself, is this like an unreasonable expectation to have that, right? Where
No, because 4 did it and 4A did it. They had like partly it's one of those like it's kind of what you're saying with like Pikmin and AC. It's like you play one with 4 you play a bad game and then you get like a better one. So it's like wow, you at least you gave me this shitty mission with no design and then you put like an AC in it. This is amazing.
so true. Yeah, you could even go back farther as far as like the legacy of action games, like stuff like Devil May Cry, right? Where substantially changes on subsequent playthroughs.
I definitely feel like that would definitely help the New Game Plus if there was just like revamped enemy encounters instead of just like having like the same like MTs.
Even if they literally just spanned more enemies.
Yeah, honestly,
because the game is generally stronger the more things you were dodging.
Yeah.
So I think if they just literally changed nothing, but they just added more like missile shooting enemies, it'd be like more fun.
Yeah, I think Alan briefly mentioned the slow kind of part trickle. I think when I think about I think a lot, sorry, but when I'm thinking back to my first playthrough, now, in retrospect, it doesn't seem as slow, and I feel like if I started a fresh file now, I probably would enjoy that more, actually, if I had, again, this curve of, the power curve that they actually intended for the game, instead of the super skewed experience with New Game Plus. So I still would defend the game kind of on that merit, but yeah, there's maybe next regulation, maybe DLC, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's not like I think the game's still enjoyable, but it's the type of thing for me where it's like there's been so many games in this series already, and like for me personally, the fact that they like, in my opinion, made the controls less interesting on their own, and I'm like not getting that back in terms of better encounter design is kind of frustrating.
I guess one thing that did surprise me about the game is how much more pulled in I was by the narrative. I feel like a lot of the stakes and a lot of the personalities were set up much more transparently, and because you just have, as an immediate comparison point, in Armored Core 3, there are these 3 corporations that are constantly warring each other, and for me it was like really hard to understand what the meaningful differences between them are, why I should care about each individual one, why I should side with each individual one. Now here in 6, it's only 2, and they're not really, like, they're different in the sense that different characters are aligned with them that have pretty noticeable personalities that you keep encountering throughout the story. And then on top of that, there's the Liberation Front, which, it's very transparent what they're kind of about. And then also there's, Handler Walter, the guy that's in charge of you, and you're always kind of wondering, okay, what the fuck is he actually up to? I think that mystery was immediately pretty compelling to me, even if the way it actually plays out in the story ultimately is something I have to stew on more. I think I have to explore the other endings to like get a fuller picture. How did y'all feel about
that? Oh well, I skipped cutscenes in the first half. So.
That's so awesome. I respect that.
Yeah,
I will say, like, I still appreciate it, right? Especially just because some of like the later missions, I would like put the controller down afterwards and be like, okay, I'll take a break, and that's when I can kind of properly appreciate what they were going for. But I mean, historically, I've never really cared for any of the Armored Core stories before this, so probably like bad faith expectations on my end.
I can see that, though. I think it's still sometimes a little bit difficult to pay attention to, like during briefings, for example. There's a stark difference in how engaging those are versus all the stuff that actually happens mid-mission. I think, again, like maybe I'm giving too much credit, but like there's an early mission, for example, where you have to destroy this prototype AC. that's being used by the Liberation Front, and the pilot is basically just screaming for his life, and it just feels bad, man. And I thought again, it's not the fucking deepest writing or anything you've ever seen, but like it's pulled off pretty well.
Yeah, I think like those smaller moments are what works best for me. There's one in Armored Core 3 that I won't like mention in full detail, but it's like at the very end that I think is just fucking genius.
Yeah, I think in 6 it worked pretty well. Like I don't think we're have any sort of like master level storytelling here, but I mean the Armored Core games I played really don't have like characters.
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
Project Phantasma has one. It's really bad. But like I think this is one where it's clearly like okay, it's like there's kind of still the themes of corporation versus humanity, and sort of blatant power struggles and stuff like that. But I think the characters are a lot more easy to like latch onto, and they're sort of like they're kind of goofy, but also it's not like totally ridiculous enough that you can't like sort of get into it.
Yeah,
I thought it worked pretty well. Yeah, I think I haven't played any of them, but it does seriously like from all the like memes and stuff I've seen of Ace Combat.
Yeah.
It feels like what those games are probably like.
Yeah, I think Ace Combat 3, sorry. That's pretty, yeah. Ace Combat 3 is like pretty stark, serious, like Ghost in the Shelly, Mamoru Oshii kind of game, right? And then the only one after that I played is what's up?
Nothing.
The only one after that I finished was 4, and 4 is like a lot like that. Yeah, it gives me a similar vibe. I think, yeah, as you said, Hapaka, like all the characters they have, again, not super unique characteristics, but very noticeable, very recognizable characteristics, right? Where I was laughing really hard earlier when Alan mentioned the whole tourist thing, because there's this character Carla who always calls you tourist. Basically, every character in the game calls you something, and that is a pretty clever way to burn that into your memory. And then again, like you said, Hapaka, like they stop hamming it up when things actually do get serious, and then you can actually, because everything's so transparent, it's relatively simple, you can actually invest yourselves in the stakes a little bit. Yeah, I don't know how much more I can say about it without like doing a deeper dive than is actually justified for like that kind of story, right? I just think it seizes upon like a lot of the ideas that are really hinted at throughout the whole series, with just warring without even knowing what the fuck you're even fighting for, and this constant flip-flopping between sides with no real moral impetus, right? And then, in 6, as it develops, it tackles this idea of trying to find that impetus. I thought it was cool. Yep.
I think for me it was definitely I was a little more mixed on it. I think the character work that they do is actually really strong, and I think that the endings, even if you don't understand like the larger implication for this world, the dilemma of which characters to align yourself with is really well handled. There's some stuff that I think is a little bit strange. There's some moments in the game where you can like or you can fight characters and you blow them up, but they live and they talk and they're still talking to you, which in some ways felt like it made some of the events or some of my choices feel like a lot more toothless. I think when you if you betray the guys at the dam early on in the game, you get like chastised for it, and then Balaam hires you again the next mission. And it feels like you can see this interaction, but like this choice and a lot of the choices don't really feel like they have affected stuff, which is kind of weird. It's like one of the things I was kind of thinking about playing some of 4A again was there is this kind of like anonymity to the briefings that I think suits like the mercenary work that you're doing. And then with the emphasis they've placed on personalities, there are certain things that I don't think the characters would really let you get away with. Like, wow, we just hired you and we gave you a new call sign and then you killed 2 of our guys. I don't know if Michigan or whatever would be cool with that. Would be cool with hiring you again and again. And there's some stuff I feel like it's something you guys mentioned earlier on with the economy of the games. But there's some cool narrative moments that I think would have more weight. There are some characters that you can align yourself with that can't pay you in the story of the world, which is a really, really cool idea. But it's like you're going to be so flush with cash in this that you get to kind of make this choice. It's ultimately down to what route do I want to see?
Yeah, this goes back to what we were saying about the structure generally, and that's this game would have just been so much stronger if they'd committed to a branchier, tighter game, right? Like Last Raven, where it just branches more frequently and more drastically, and then the game is half as long, right? Or maybe a quarter as long. Yeah, I would love to see that version of AC6, but I'm still pretty satisfied with what's there in the end.
I think this is a numbered entry. This is a main a numbered entry after 10 years of of nothing.
Yeah.
I think if they do DLC or if they did an expansion pack, that's where I think the best that's where all the ACs that we are from are the ones where it's they can be a little bit weirder with it and they can make something that's designed for, I assume, a smaller set of players. They can be a little more hostile or they can take kind of those bolder swings.
Yeah.
Which is, I think.
Oh, go ahead.
No, but I think that's the stuff that we like.
Yeah, I think it's promising to see so many people apparently latch onto this game. It seems pretty popular on Steam and all that stuff. I think that's most of what we had to say on AC6. Just off the top, we had a couple more notes here. We have a community Google Doc. They were just adding stuff to. I think this reads like it was Raph. It says list games that do similar things better. Then next point, seriously list them. Raph, do you have a take on that?
I don't know who wrote that. I don't know. Y'all should play Overload. It's on PC and PS4 and I think Xbox. It's it kind of
is it the 6 Degrees of Freedom?
Yeah. I mostly compare it because it has a similar sort of 3-dimensional dodging of misleading enemies' fire and then dashing the other direction. It has similar dynamics between melee versus ranged attacks. It has all sorts of cool stuff, but with really, really, really strong encounter design, really strong mission design, lengthy missions with exploration and resource management. And basically Doom levels, right? But it's good. Try it.
Yeah, that game is one that I was sort of just eyeing a little bit. I never heard that many people talking about it, but it always looked really cool.
Yeah, dope.
Do you have some other games you want to recommend? Or Hot Pocket, do you want to say something?
I'm gonna mention very quick. I think Armored Core 6 looks insanely beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy how good it looks.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not an art student, but I don't have anything super meaningful or interesting or fleshed out to say about it. But just on that polish level and that artistic level, just the way the colors are sort of matched to each other. The skies are often these real. I'm kind of colorblind, but these really interesting bluish kind of hues, and then coupled with the foreground, I don't know. It looks graphics good. Yeah.
Look good. Yeah.
Game good. I think I recently learned the scale of objects actually is sorta consistent. Somebody imported, obviously they're running on the same engine, Elden Ring and Armored Core 6, and somebody imported Armored Core 6's models into Elden Ring, and they learned, oh shit, they're actually 10 meters tall in the world of Elden Ring. When I was playing Armored Core 6, I did something about the scale did feel intuitively off to me. I couldn't really put my finger on why. But it seems to be correct. So that's kind of
In
cool.
some of the environments, you can see little human-sized doors. It's so funny to like put your mech next to him. It's a little door.
Yeah. Well, I remember that was apparently one of the like big deals about Last Raven is that they finally properly showed like the scale. There's like one little human dude in Phantasma, but Last Raven is they actually like even have human like in-game models in some missions.
Yeah, like second mission in Last Raven, you go through a tunnel and you fire at some humans. I was like, whoa! It's like it was like my fourth game in the series. It was like my fourth game in the series. That's why I was like, whoa, shit, that's crazy. Yeah. Any more games anyone wants to recommend that are that do everything better? Like
Virtual on guys. Hey, Virtual on.
Okay, actually, this is a great point. So good friend of the show who's also been here a bunch of times, Heather. She's like the world's biggest virtual on stan, and she's been working her Armored Core rejection campaign. She's like so not interested in the series at all, and trying to get us to play virtual on its set. We'll cover that probably, right? Like there's like ones on Dreamcast and shit, right? That's like Beach Gen.
That was one of the first games on my 4x4 or whatever for this Beach Gen.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Robots.
There's one more game that does it even better. It's called Phantom Dust for the Xbox One.
Oh, he's so good. He's so good.
No, it's actually true. It's like you're building your car. You're building your deck is basically building your AC.
That's so true. Okay, yeah, look forward to that. That's the next game we'll be discussing here on Beach Gen Game Club. Thank you for making it this far. This is a pretty nice, tight episode. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and let us know what you think. Are you gonna fucking go back, play the other AC games? Did we maybe sell you on them by basically explaining that they're really cool 6 out of 10s? Did that whet your appetite?
Eat your veggies.
Eat your veggies, yes.
Your veggies, otherwise you can't appreciate the good ones.
Exactly. AC, like Raph is saying in chat, AC6 is a 9. Let's see, like, dear listeners, if you listen to Raph speak up to this point, and now you hear him say it's a 9. If you don't think that's schizophrenic, then I don't fucking know. Yeah.
Turn that 6 upside down.
All right, goodbye.
Oh yeah, we gotta mention
9
breakers and 9 because it's 9.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan knows about that. He wrote like the most detailed review of Armored Core 9 Breaker.
It is for real, like the funniest game ever made, like in the most unintentional way. It's just fucking hilarious.
I think I need to dig into that for like the meme factor. All right, bye everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Later.
Yeah.
Yeah, peace.